Listen up. Smoke is spreading all across Equestria. But don't worry, I've received a letter from the princess informing me that it is not coming from a fire. Okay, Xanth, give me a timetable, I said. The flames were spreading from the burning rocket, and the central space was beginning to fill with a thick black smoke. The heat of the blue radiation fires was quickly becoming eclipsed by the heat of the more ordinary-looking but no less dangerous orange flames from the zebra fuel. Still, on the bright side, the warhead coming to a rest below the medical level, leaning against the far wall, meant that the route up was clear, assuming we had the time. After a brief, but far too long moment of silence, I looked over at the zebra staring down in horror at the spectacle below us. "Xanth, how long do we have?" She blinked and then turned to me, chewing her lip. "There are 4 fuel pods. As the lowest heats up, the fuel that isn't on fire will boil and eventually breach the pod above it, spreading the fire even more and accelerating." I swatted her flank with my tail. "I need a number. Minutes? Hours? What?" We were backing away from the heat and smoke that began to swirl in through the smashed-out window. "Half an hour, at the most," Xanth whimpered. "If we had more time and Cerberus were intact, we might have severed the warhead and removed it, but—" "Yeah, that plan is out the window," I said. Between the smooths and those flaming ghouls, I really wasn't bothered by the idea of Hightower being gone soon. Particularly since, if we could get in, that the smooths could get out. Still, Meat Locker need to be warned that their neighbor is about to go boom. Can you get Cerberus flying again and out through the hole? Without getting blasted? I asked, pointing at the gaping hole 2 stories above us with my stump. Of all our flyers, Cerberus was the only one we could really spare to warn Meat Locker. "I don't know. His levitation system should already be functional enough, but depending on the targeting talismans in the turrets, they might let him go, or they could disintegrate him," she said, and bit her lip again. Then she jerked her head up with a smile. "I'll examine one of the sentries and see if they have an intact IFF unit." She turned and raced away from the window and down the hall. "You have 5 minutes!" I yelled after her, then coughed as the acrid smoke was filling the air. I suspected that death by balefire blast could be preempted by the far more mundane peril of smoke inhalation. I turned to look at Stygius, Psychoshy, and Silver Spoon. "Go back to Rampage. Get the Radaway bottled up however you can, and make sure those supplies you scavenged are passed around." I closed my eyes and asked Lacuna, "Any ideas on dealing with all this smoke?" Just because I was connected to the goddess didn't mean I had to use all those freaky Olicorn powers. "Wet clothes tied around our muzzles should help. Respirators would be better," she replied immediately. "We don't have any respirators, so tie wet clothes over your muzzles," I shouted at the pair of flyers as they flew back towards the radiology storage, then coughed again myself. I looked up at the power-armored griffin and shouted, "Carrion, see if you can find a way up to the armory. Lacuna, take snips and see if you can get my sword," I said, looking sternly at the portly unicorn ghoul thing. Lacuna looked at me oddly, but then trotted back to radiology. With every pony was away doing something, I collapsed, clenched my chest, and tearing up from the pain. Whatever curse Snips had put on me, the sensation was spreading. I could feel the chewing feeling halfway through my ribs and throat. Everything hurt. The ebb and surge of pain grew heavier with every breath. I had to fight it. He hadn't been able to end this curse, so now my only hope was that there was something Snips's partner could do to help me. I could only spare a minute to address the pain. It wasn't an injury I was going to regenerate or damage that could be magically repaired. I just had to get the rest of them to safety. Carrion appeared out of the smoke, the cloud swirling around him as his milky eyes narrowed on me, doubled over. "There's a way up to the 7th level, if we do some climbing. There are more flaming ones, and this is not nearly as effective using spark batteries. he said as he held up the beam gun that Xanth had created. A half-dozen spark batteries were wired up around the perimeter near the handles. I did everything I could to straighten up and smile. Good job. We'll get out of this yet. He just stared at me, and I felt a new sweat popping on my brow. What? Oh, if only you were a griffin, he muttered as he looked skyward. I would have given my left paw for a commander like you. I blinked in shock. Thanks? I replied, then peered up at where the smoke was being blown out of a hole in the prison wall, then back at him. Were you a soldier before? I balked, not sure how rude it was to point out that he died. The question seemed to annoy him a little, but not for the reasons I thought. I am a soldier. All griffins are soldiers, from the youngest chick to the oldest harpy. We're all soldiers. We strive for assertiveness, certainty, and martial skill, and hold ourselves to our honor and our contracts, he says coolly, as he looks in the direction of the bomb. Though now there was so much smoke that all I could see was a murky blue glow. It seemed to cut the radiation down a little, at least. Sorry, I don't know much about griffins, I said. Talking helped my mind get off the curse inside me. Just that you fought us during the war? I vaguely remembered a few references in 99's history lessons to the marginal effect of Griffin mercenaries during the war, but I was leery of trusting anything academic from 99. We fought for both sides. We fought to protect neutral parties, fought for whoever owned our contracts. The only people we never fought were our own kind. You keep talking about these contract things. Can you tell me more about it? I asked with a baffled smile. He shrugged. It's not a thing ponies understand. Our contract is a reflection of who we are and what we will and won't do. For a griffin to claim that they will and won't do, and then do just that, justifies our own existence. I won't kill young, nor will I lie. No order, no threat, no bribe will make me do so. To do otherwise would violate my contract. Once, whole rookies were bound by common contracts that defined them. There was even a griffin who once tried to get all griffin kind to adopt a common clause in our contracts, putting griffin interests first. But unfortunately, Gilda failed, and none know what became of her. So how did Awizodel get your contract? I asked, and received a scowl in response. If I can ask. Commanders do not ask. They order others to tell them what they wish to know. It sounded like griffins were creeping up on zebras for weirdest species ever. I pledged my contract to the holder for as long as I lived. First to a family of scavengers who hid my young during the war with the Enclave. The father was an honorable earth pony, but when he died, my contract passed to his son. He drove off my family and used me as a weapon, forcing me to kill any who attacked him due to his unreasonable and obnoxious demands. I would have happily killed him, or allowed them to, if it would not have violated my contract. He discovered an empty stable far to the south and set about looting it, but the fool ignored the signs of radiation. When he passed out, I carried him from the stable, but the radiation was already terminal and we both became ghouls. In Meat Locker, he sold my contract to the bartender to pay his tab. I've been Shifty's servant ever since. My ears perked. Shifty? I thought you worked for Awizodel. He just shrugged. They're one and the same. He thought that Awizodel was far more impressive sounding. Did Awizodel have dealings with zebras? I demanded. I protect the holder of my contract. That includes his secrets, he said with sullen resignation. I wanted to demand that he tell the truth, but I guessed it was futile. He died of radiation poisoning, saving the life of a pony he hated to avoid breaking his contract. Then I blinked as an idea came to me. If this worked, tell me he didn't have dealings with zebras. The griffin balked and scowled sharply. Then he knit his brows as if processing my response. I hoped that killing me to protect his secrets wasn't in the contract. Then Carrion looked right at me and simply smiled. Yes, maybe brain tumors had made me smarter. Go help the others, I said as I looked down the hall at Xanth had taken, then began to limp along it as quickly as I could. Tulip had died outside mortuary, her skull crushed with a single overwhelming blow. The remnant had gotten their tip-off from a ghoul that turned out to be the owner of that bar. And Xanth had known about Meat Locker. Had she simply heard of his location, or had she been there before? The thought of the remnant being able to get soldiers inside and kill ponies like Velvet and Windclop. I found the zebra half buried in the shell of one of the sentries. She said something zebra-ish and pulled her head out with a gadget in her mouth. Then her eyes widened and she dropped the device as I stepped forward, rising onto my rear legs to close the last few feet, grabbing her collar of the suit, tugging her almost onto her hind hoof tips. "Nathan!" she wailed, and the suit flickered and she disappeared. I tightened my grip on it, my eyes locked on the shimmering where I knew her head was. "Xanth?" I kept my voice low and even as I gave her the shootiest look I could. "You haven't told me everything you should have. Tell me now, is the remnant in Meat Locker?" She cried out, and I felt the invisible hooves beat on my chest. "Tell me the truth." She appeared in a flash, her eyes wide and streaked with tears. "The truth is you have cursed me," she wailed as I stared into her eyes. "You are going to destroy my people. You are the Maiden of the Stars, Nightmare Moon, the champion of the deepest darkness. And if I do not oppose you, my home, my people, are doomed." I slowly relaxed my grip and sat down, running my hand over my face. Not this shit again. "Xanth, I am not Nightmare Moon. I saw the real Nightmare Moon in a memory once. That's not me." The zebra rubbed her throat and kept her eyes low. "How do you know you are not?" Then she looked at me with the first hard gaze I'd seen from her. "The maiden is born of heartache and sorrow, and I know you suffer. She butchers all who oppose her, and I saw what you did at Yellow River. She sows destruction for the entire world. That monster you slew was indestructible, and yet you destroyed it." I slumped. "Xanth, I got lucky." Something in me was drawn tight, a single raw nerve growing sharper and sharper. That's all it is. That's all it has been. Luck. Luck that you die but return to life. Luck that you overcome any adversity. The zebra scoffed. Luck that you stumble across the secrets of ages past. "It's just stupid fucking luck," I screamed at her, and she curled up into a ball. But I couldn't stop. I was like a canister of explosive gas with a hole punched in the side as I shouted. "Luck that I got out of 99. Luck that I survived. Luck that I found friends who would help me. I don't have any kind of dark, magical power. Hell, I'm damned lucky I can even summon a wisp of light. And just because I've survived, don't think it was easy. Don't think I haven't paid for surviving when others died. But that's all there is to it. I'm not Nightmare Moon. I'm not the Maiden of the Stars. And I'm not special, and I'm not going to put up with it any longer," I screamed down at her. "You sure about that?" Psycho Shy asked behind me. I turned and saw all the others staring in shock. "'Cause I saw what you did at Hippocampic, and Rampage has been trying to convince me you really are some fucking paragon and not the scariest fucking mare I could ever imagine." "Don't give me that," I began, but she flew out in front of the others and pressed her face right down onto mine. "Don't you blow me off, Blackjack," she snapped. Her eyes narrowed. "Because you are scary. There's not a single one of us that isn't afraid of you on some damn level. You're a fucking cyborg, mutant, death mare who could probably kill every single one of us if she wanted to. You talk to shit, that there isn't there no things that no fucking pony should know, and you keep on going. Why the fuck shouldn't she think of you as Nightmare Moon? Why the fuck shouldn't everyone hear? Because I'm trying to do good, I countered, twisting around to face her. I'm trying to make the world better. Glad to hear it. But that still doesn't make you any less damn scary. Because all it would take is you changing your mind and the rest of us are dead. Maybe you think the world would be better without Psycho-Shy. What are my chances of stopping you if you really wanted to kill me? She thinks you're the devil. I'd say you're 2 steps away. And any pony who's seen you fight would agree with me. She stared into my eyes, so taut that she seemed ready to snap. There was anger in those eyes, sure. But there was also fear. I looked behind her at my companions, at the concern, wariness, and worry in their eyes. I felt the pain tighten up inside of me. I seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. No, I was a good pony. I might not have known what my virtue was, but I was a good pony. I tried. Damn it! And I heard a voice from within me, strange and cold, a mare whispering softly in my ear, a mare who once offered tricks for a hoofful of bits. It doesn't matter how good you are. To some ponies, you'll always be a monster. I looked at Rampage, and 6 ponies looked back at me through one set of eyes. It doesn't matter how awesome you are. Other ponies will tear you down if they can. I swallowed, my gaze moving to Snips and seeing the cool understanding in his luminescent stare, and that cold whisper changed into an angry mare's suspicious murmur. It's hard to smile when every pony does is lie. But whirring inside of me got sharper, the scream of enervation growing clearer. I'd tried to give them all I could. What more did they want from me? It doesn't matter what you try to give. They'll never really appreciate it. Silver Spoon looked at me with her hurt eyes, hurt that I wasn't the friend she'd sought for so long. Of course you always hurt the ones you care about. The more you care, the more they hurt. Funny, why was Psycho-Shy snickering in my ears? Their lips were moving, but I couldn't hear them over the damned screams and whispers. Go on, Blackjack. Tell yourself you're okay. Maybe this time, you'll believe it. I fell to my knees and clenched my eyes shut. I felt like the world was slipping away. I could hear Nightmare Moon's cold laugh as she rose to power, as she gave in, as she felt such joy. It had been so long since I'd been happy. So long. Then, a mare's voice said softly, Come on, Blackjack. You're smarter than that. Slowly, I raised my eyes and looked at Lacuna, the alicorn smiling ever so slightly. You know what the difference is. You just have to remember. When you do something wrong, what do you have to do? You're right, I said, as the twisting in my chest slowly ceased. You're right. I can be pretty damn scary. And I know that I shouldn't get angry for what Xanth thinks of me. I guess I do match this maiden pretty well. I turned and looked back at Xanth. I'm sorry. Then my eyes returned to Psycho-Shy, and I gave an exhausted smile. The difference is that I try and do better. I know I'm a fuck-up, but I haven't given up. I know that I can be a better pony, and I try to be. I don't always make it, and someday I might stop. And if I do, I trust that a better pony, like Lacuna, Rampage, Stygius, or you, will put an end to me. Until then, though, I am not Nightmare Moon. I never will be. There was an awkward moment. Psycho-Shy trotted over to Stygius, both of them looking back at me with a worried frown. One of the ghouls is our agent, Xanth murmured, so softly that for a second I thought I'd imagined it. He feeds us intelligence and passes messages on for a steep price. He has for years. The zebra glanced up and stiffened, begging in a whimper, "Please, don't kill my people, maiden." I sighed and reached out, paused, and then patted her head. "I don't want to kill anyone, Xanth. Not if I can help it." Then I looked at my stump. And right now, I'm not looking like I'm going to kill much of anything. Nurse Graves died helping us. I just want to make sure Meat Locker is safe. But a ghoul named Tulip had her head crushed, and I'm pretty sure it was a zebra who did it. She pressed her lips together and added, "I'm not saying it because I hate zebras, Xanth. I just don't want people who help me to get hurt." Xanth licked her lips and looked at the IFF gadget. I can include a message. If there is one of Caesar's hooves hidden in Meat Locker, they'll be somewhere near mortuary. A locked storeroom, perhaps?" She glanced at Carrion, then dropped her gaze a little. "I just wanted to protect my people." "Me too," I said, rising to my hooves again. "Work quick. We need to get going." But getting going would take a minute or two. While most of the Radaway in the storeroom had been lost, there were tablets of Buck, Fixer, and Radex intact, as well as bottles of water. We all chowed down on the chalky tablets. Rampage passed out water bottles filled with her recycled Radaway, and we each took a drink or two. It had been energized with flux, which probably meant taint. As Xanth bowed out of the room to work on Cerberus, I swirled the bottle of orangey fluid with my magic. "Are you sure it's safe to add that flux stuff? Don't want any pony growing eye-tentacle penises now." "Flux is good shit, Pink," Rampage retorted. "Always added a drop or two to my dash to turn it into Rainboom. Great shit. Got you so high even Earth ponies could fly." Then her grin melted into an angry scowl. "And when they ended up in the ER, they looked like they'd fallen from flight too." She rolled her eyes and snorted. "Hey, not every pony can handle the dash." Xanth returned with Cerberus in tow. I glanced at the zebra and then at the robot. "You understand your mission?" The robot sighed. "Return to Meat Locker, tell those pansy ghouls about the bomb, and warn them about a zebra infiltrator. Who? Rah!" he muttered sullenly. "Retreating when there's still hundreds of acceptable targets is just sickening." "Buck up, soldier. There'll be other ghouls to disintegrate," I said, earning a surprised and slightly troubled look from Silver Spoon. "Remember, straight there." "Yes, ma'am. Let it never be said the Equestrian Mechanical Corps failed to execute orders," he announced, and gave a sort of salute-like gesture with his remaining claw. Lacuna and Snips walked over, the blue unicorn holding my sword in his magic, as far away from himself as possible, as if the blade were diseased and reeking. I slipped it into its sheath with a smile and thanked him. With that, we started our climb, first up through the shattered windows and onto the narrow sloping ledge of metal that ran around the interior, and then up to the crumbling rubble around the breach in the prison wall. Those of us not capable of flight were assisted by those who were. The three of us with magic flung blazing clumps of debris down into the inferno below as the air grew thicker and visibly shortened. I kept waiting for something to spring out at us. Another flaming ghoul, or maybe the warden would send his robots again. But for once our opponents were time and gravity. Finally, we came to a hole punched in the ceiling and exterior wall. I looked at the inch-thick steel armor plating on the exterior wall as we moved up close to the hole. Hot air blew out around us, carrying a plume of smoke out like a chimney. "How do we know if this IFF is going to work?" I yelled over the howling air. Rain was pouring down outside. It looked like late afternoon. Had we really only been in Hightower for a few hours? Felt like weeks. "If he flies out of there and explodes, we know it didn't work," Carry-On replied. Xanth looked up from where she made a few checks on the gadgets she'd taped to the robot's side and gave a shrug. All right then! Hoorah! The robot shouted as he floated out of the hole. For Equestria! He roared, dropping like a rock. I gaped and leaned out of the hole as I watched him fall. Lacuna looked out above me, and a purple glow surrounded the robot, slowing his descent as he leveled out. He floated over the heads of the glowing ghouls below and headed out for the wall, before I finally lost sight of him in the rain and smoke. Hopefully, he'd pull it off. And then I put him out of my mind as Lacuna and Psycho-Shy lifted me up through the broken floor to the high-security floor right beneath the armory. The gray smoke was darkening, but the radiation was still damned high, despite the smoke. Wait, the radiation was actually climbing. Then I stopped wondering why as I saw blue flames slowly approaching. Flamer! I warned as the swirling smoke parted to reveal a flaming pony squeezing out of a breached cell. Vigilance came up as I stood in the gap and sighted along the barrel, planting shots as precisely as I could. The flaming ghoul let out a scream and charged. My bullets half vaporized before striking his skull. The 12.7mm rounds were substantial enough to slow it down, but beyond that... Then Carrion flew up the hole behind me, and a line of green lanced out and began to chew through the ghoul. Xanth was placed beside me, firing her sidearm wildly into its torso as I kept my shots on its head. Finally, silver arrows streaked through the smoke and sank into the flaming monster's head. It collapsed in on itself, disappearing into a heap of green dust. Carrion stopped firing, his beam gun smoking in his claws. Conductor's melted, Xanth shouted, reaching out into one of her packs for a gray block of metal, tossing it atop her head, then kicking a smoking chunk off the bottom of the jury-rigged gun. As the block came down, she slammed it home into the gap, and the gun gave an ominous hum once again. Then from the cell beside her came a scream and a bellow, crackling ball of green fire as the glowing ghoul within launched a blast of radioactive magic at us. Carrion swooped around, caught Xanth in one forearm and whirled. His wings spread wide and blocked the barrage. Lacuna and I moved around him and slipped into sats almost at once. The ghouls weren't the fiery variety, and bullets made their heads explode into fountains of radioactive gore and bone. Carrion's wings were both disintegrating and regenerating from the radioactive blasts as the AM rifle boomed next to me. 4 down? About 400 to go between here and the armory door. Between the bar walls of each cell were stretches of concrete wall just barely wide enough for a single pony to take cover in. Lacuna, can you shield us? I thought at her. Aye. It is very hard to focus. I think the talisman's wearing off. I should be able to protect myself, but we must hurry. Alicorns and ghouls might be empowered by radiation, but enervation was another matter. Right, I shouted, not able to see more than 10 feet in the smoke. Move quick. Call out if you see a flaming one. Move! And I hobbled out in the lead, diving across the front of the cells and barely missing the radioactive blasts that the glowing ghouls within launched at me. Some held as many as half a dozen stuck behind the bars. Cell by cell, I jumped and rolled, half the time landing on my face as my body kept using a stump like it was a full leg. Once I fell short and a flaming one, thankfully still trapped almost, cooked me before I could get closer. Stygia's shadow flashed right in the middle of the cell and kicked the beast in the head as a distraction, reappearing back with us as it turned in response. Worse than the flames and blasts were the screams for help, though. In more than one cell I saw glowing ghouls among their feral brethren and begging to be let out. I just couldn't think of a way we could open the fused steel doors and extract them safely. I wanted to give them a chance. I needed to. But sometimes we don't always get what we want or need. Keep moving! Rampage shouted, shoving me away from a pleading ghoul who thought I was a prison guard, just in time to keep the ghoul's cellmates from blasting me. Damn it. Even if I wanted to help, there was no way I could let 24 half-crazy ghouls escape intact for even one sane one. We reached the corner, and a turret popped down and started to strafe us. The bullets must have made a lucky hit, because Lacuna screamed as half a dozen rounds punched through her weakened shield, and ripped right through her left foreleg at the knee. The mare dropped, and Silver Spoon grabbed a rag from the floor and immediately began to stem the bleeding. I dodged into a path of bullets, raising my foreleg as to protect my face. I could take a few rounds of machine gun fire. At least I hoped I could. I took aim and blasted the chattering turret. Rampage raced to the corner, drawing the fire from me, and sprang off the concrete wall, crashing right through the ceiling turret. Then she turned and grinned back at me. Then she disappeared in a sheet of blue fire. She didn't even get a chance to scream as she curled up like a lump of coal. One flaming one walked slowly through the smoke towards us, inhaling another breath to blast me. Then Carrion was there, moving around the corner with the beam gun in his claws. The beam streaked through the smoky air and collided with the ghoul's head in a shower of blue-green sparks. It didn't, however, stop the second plume of radioactive fire from washing over us. Carrion flew up, intercepting the majority of the flames with his power armor as he kept the beam on target. I would have given him a medal if I could. The beam gun sparked and died even as the flaming ghoul crumbled. "Oh, please tell me I can fix it. Please, please!" The zebra fretted as she looked over it. Carrion, his feathers blackened and fur smoking, just looked slightly indignant as she fussed beside him. "Well?" I asked as I beat out the flames. She gave me a stricken look that told me we'd better not run into another free-roaming flaming one. "Never mind. Psycho, Stygius, get Rampage." Then I turned and knelt. To my amazement and relief, Lacuna's leg was already regenerating before my eyes. I looked at her severed leg with the pip buck attached. "That's not going to regenerate a new Lacuna, is it?" "Of course not," she said as she levitated the cuff and pulled her leg out of the pip buck. "I'm going to miss Sats, though." Then she passed the device to me and tossed the foreleg away. "You'd better hold on to it."
She's heavy,"
the Pegasus mare protested, but she and Stygius managed to heave the charred mare up between them. "Deal with it," I replied as we made our way to the middle of the next face and two more turrets. Lacuna and Carrion and I blasted them with a barrage of gunfire that made short work of them. Then we were at the armory doors. Yeah, I could see why Snips thought we'd need a balefire egg. These doors were so tough that they didn't melt or warp like most of the metal at this level. There wasn't a terminal or a lock to pick either. I started to wheeze. Damn this smoke. "How does it open?"
"Only from the inside, and there's no windows in the armory,"
Snips yelled back over the fires below.
"That's why I brought the egg."
The charcoal lump cracked, and Rampage shook herself hard, shedding the crumbly black shell.
"Am I still grown up?" she asked,
inspecting the scorched armor still fused to charred chunks of hide.
Hammersmith's gonna kill me."
"I'd like to see that," Psychoshy countered. I beat my hoof against the door several times, slumping in futility. "Blackjack," Lacuna said softly in my mind. I looked up at her and saw her staring down into the smoke, three burning forms advancing from behind us, flickering through the acidic black clouds. I smacked my gray-etched steel hand against the wall, then stared at it for a second. Could that work? "Clear that cell," I said, shouting as I pointed to the next one down. Fortunately, all the ghouls inside were feral glowing ones. Lacuna and Carrion weathered their barrage of radioactive fire. I noticed that once or twice the radioactive blasts actually got through Lacuna's weakened shield. When their talisman died, how long would she last? Or would our minds start jumping like between normal alicorns until we fell apart? Regardless, 10 seconds later, the cell was empty. "Open the door," I said as I looked back along the row. The flaming ones were still taking their time. Maybe they didn't know we were here, or maybe they knew there was nowhere left for us to go. Rampage and Carrion smashed the door, busting it open, and as Xanth sat on the floor with a beam gun in her hooves, swapping out capacitors, spark batteries, and who knew what, trying to get it to work.
What are you doing, Tiara?
Silver Spoon asked as she fidgeted, looking at the mindless ghouls in the cell in horror. The fused but apparently weakened metal gave way as Carrion pulled the door off and tossed it aside. I ran past the still dimly glowing ghoul corpses, and right to the back of the cell and the metal toilet. The concrete above the toilet had been defaced by dozens of names.
Oh, I guess when you gotta go,
the Earth Pony muttered as she looked away at once. The bowl was empty, the contents long ago evaporated, and I shouted down to the metal basin. Hey! Hey you! Worthless piece of slime! You ignorant, disgusting blob! Rampage rushed up beside me, looking on in confusion. I glared down and banged the toilet, shouting. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, then blinked, grinned, and joined me in insulting the drain. You're nothing but an unstable short-chain molecule, huh? You foul, obnoxious muck! I yelled, giving the mare a confused look. Of all the ponies in her, Octopus was the one shouting insults? Really? You have a weak electrochemical bond, she shouted down into the bowl. Yes, really. I've seen some disgusting crud in my time, but you take the cake, I roared down the toilet. And Rampage shook me. You're nothing but... Another shake. You're just... Blackjack, look, she said in a voice that was definitely not the doctor, pointing her blackened hoofclaw at a pair of names scratched in the middle of the rest. Doof, and immediately below that, Deus. This was his cell, his tiny 8x6 space that held 4 ponies. This was where he ended up, where he'd gone from a mere criminal rapist to a monster. Twist's wide pink eyes stared at me in horror. And then I smelled sulfur. Back! Get back! I yelled, the toilet suddenly shrieking. Then the billowy blue sludge erupted out and began to pour across the floor. I staggered back out of the cell, falling on my rump. Rampage bit my mane and dragged me out as the smooths began to form into a slime pony. Back on the walkway, the 3 flaming ponies were nearly upon us. Lacuna! Snips! Throw! I screamed as I scooped up blue smooths with my magic and flung it at the 3 flaming ponies. The monsters made no effect to dodge. Why would they? Bullets melted before they were struck. Then a rain of glowing, hissing sludge began to rain down upon them, and the 3 let out screams of pain and fury. The blue slime hissed and blackened when it came into contact with their flaming hides, but it also extinguished their flames a bit. We fell back, step by step, and the 3 flaming ones charged. Slow them down, I yelled. Psychopsi and Stygius darted in overhead, smashing hooves against the darker patches and knocking them back. The pool of smooths slipped along their blazing hooves, and the 3 now screamed in pain as they tried to back out of it. Then one fell into the acidic sludge, and it grabbed at its fellows and pulled them down as well. The smooths fluttered over them, boiling and blackening and letting out a noxious reek that made me gag. The ghouls struggled, raising melted heads as the entire concoction cooked into a blackened tar-like mud. Even the smooths seemed to find the 3 a little too spicy for its taste. The blue sludge was disappearing into the corroded toilet. The smoking mess left behind was so destructive that it was eating into the concrete floor. Wait, if that was strong enough to do that... Smear it on the door! I yelled, scooping it up in my magic and painting the tar-like mix across the armored entrance. It began to hiss, pop, and steam. Every pony else stepped back as our magic worked, trying to apply as much to the door as we could. The sticky mung had already eaten away halfway through the door. The face of the door were crumbling away in a sheet of rusting smoke, and we added another layer. Rampage barely scooped it up with flat slabs of flaked-off steel. The tar ate through the floor and began to drip down to the next level, and we hurried to use as much as we could. Too bad it was too hazardous to take with us. The infernal mix ate through anything, even Sparkle Cola bottles. Finally, the hoof-sized lock drum in the middle just fell right out, leaving a hole a pony could peek through. Stygius peeked and shadow flashed inside. A minute later, there was a loud thunk, then another, and the door opened with a crack. It took all of our magic and Carrion's power armor to get the door open enough to squeeze through, and even so, Carrion had to remove his armor, wiggle his way through the gap, pull the armor through piece by piece, and put it back on. Still, we made it. Lacuna, however, couldn't. There was simply no way for the alicorn to pass through the gap. She could fit her head and neck in, but no matter how much we shoved the heavy armored door, the gap simply wasn't wide enough for her body. She screwed her face up and tried to teleport, but the prison's magic barrier was still in effect. Whatever Stygius did to get around it, the alicorn couldn't replicate the feat. She met my eyes and gave me a sad smile. Shall we skip the argument about you not leaving me behind? I'm not leaving you down here to die, I said immediately, and she chuckled and shook her head. I thought not. Take this, she said as she passed her AM gun through the gap. Simple physics is sometimes our greatest enemy. I settled it across my shoulders as she looked me in the eyes. Keep going. Find a way up to the attic, and out. She looked back towards the hole and said, before I could argue, by myself, I might be able to reach the roof before the turrets take me out. Lacuna, there's gotta be another way, I said as I tried to adjust the gun's massive weight. There isn't. Now go. I'll see you on the roof. And then she turned away, spread her wings, and flew silently into the smoke. Lacuna! I shouted after her. The further away she went, the greater the interference became between us. I couldn't hear her voice, or she was trying to keep it from me. Blackjack, Rampage said as she nudged me, but I closed my eyes, trying to maintain the connection with Lacuna. The animation interference was horrible. She kept coming in and out of focus like a badly tuned radio. The exertion made my head throb. 1 second. I want to make sure she gets out okay, I said through grit teeth as I concentrated. Images came in bursts. I saw her winging her way down the largest puddle of blue flame, nearly standing inside it as she soaked up as much radiation as she could. Then her standing on the cusp of the hole. Then the alicorn took flight, swooping her way higher and higher along the face of the prison. Red beams sprayed out of the turrets at her, and her shield flickered and flashed as she pumped her wings. The Hoovington rain around her glistening crimson and white. Then she soared up and landed on the edge. She made it. It was safe. I let out a held breath. Then there was a flash of red, the darkness, and then a scream of enervation. I suddenly found myself incapable of breathing as I stood there. Lacuna? I thought at her. Lacuna! I said aloud as I tried to push my brain to hers. Nothing but the enervation static. Lacuna! I screamed as loud as I could. Nothing. Gone. She couldn't be gone. She couldn't be. I thought at her again and again, frantically, tears running down my face as I struggled to make my pathetic magic somehow make contact with the mare. Please. Please, please, please. No. I groaned as I clenched my eyes shut. It was like Mom dying, only this time I was able to appreciate it much more. Blackjack! Rampage shouted, and I came to in time to hear the grind of wheels and the crackle of robotic voices babbling their nonsense of halting and authorization for lethal force. My eyes popped open as I spotted the intact sentry at the top of the stairs, pointing its Gatling beam gun and missile launcher down at me and the rest of my friends. The AM rifle floated up beside me. I'd never handled a gun this big or heavy before, but frankly, at this moment I didn't give a shit about simple physics. I pulled the scope to my eye, slipped into SATs, and cued 2 shots in the pristine missile pod. The 2 rounds ripped into the armored side, and a moment later the missile within exploded, knocking the sentry to the side and throwing the spray of beam fire wide. I advanced up the stairs at a steady walk, tears in my eyes. She'd been a goddess. She'd been a friend. and this place had taken her from me. All for my stupid obsession. I blasted again and again as I walked up the steps, the rifle punching holes in his chest. Finally, its head exploded into a shower of sparks, just as I reached the top of the stairs. There was another security door, but this one had a terminal and 2 more turrets. I could have used the sentry for cover, but right then I didn't really give a shit. Let them shoot me. Hurting was infinitely more than the feelings that arose from the thought of my friend being gone. The scream of enervation matched the throb in my chest and the tears in my eyes as I blasted at the turrets.
Shit, she's berserk,
I heard Rampage say distantly. No, she is not, Xanth replied as I walked forward, closing the distance and blasting slowly and deliberately.
Well, why don't you shoot her in the head? It works wonders for you,
Psycho-Shy retorted. I hurt like hell, but that didn't matter. I'd plow a way out for all of them to get alive. Together. No matter how full of holes I was. Rampage tackled me to the ground, taking the shots meant for me. Carrion jumped atop the scrapped sentry as his miniguns purred, and several seconds later the turrets were scrapped.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Rampage demanded as she flipped me onto my back. I looked up at Rampage and swallowed. Lacuna's gone. Everything hurt, in part because I'd just been torn in 2 by 3 rapid-fire enemies. A few seconds more and I wouldn't have been hurting anymore. She died. Because of me. Rampage looked down at me, and a corner of her mouth curled as she said,
Yeah, she did. Even I murdered my best friends.
Then she shuddered and staggered off me.
Shut the fuck up, you monster, she hissed,
grabbing the side of her head.
But why? She knows the truth already. Her friend is dead. Died because of her,
she said with a leer as she looked back at me.
Shut up,
she shouted, tearing off her helmet and then slamming her forehead against the wall.
I'm sick of you, you vile,
smack,
vicious, smack, thing,
crack. She slumped, collapsing on her side as I slowly rose and started to hobble closer. The striped pony panted as she looked up at me.
I think I'm losing my mind, Blackjack. I think...
Suddenly she hung her head.
I deserve to die. Please.
She cursed in zebra and smashed her head against the wall with another crunch.
Silence!
Then she laughed again, high and harsh.
Oh, we are so fucked. We are so fucked.
Finally, there was one last crunch and she slid to the ground. All of us stared at her as she lay there, and I put my blood-speckled stump on her shoulder.
You have to be strong, Blackjack. Please.
It's not about you, Blackjack. I forced a smile and patted her shoulder. Hey, don't worry. I just went a little crazy too. That enervating scream was getting annoying, like a hoof scraping a chalkboard. We'll get through this, Rampage. We'll get through it.
Rampage. There is no Rampage. No R lost. I'm just a half-dozen ponies squished together in one jar.
She wiped the blood off her face with a hoof as her body healed itself. Slowly, she turned and walked to the door ahead. Xanth kept her eyes low as she trotted the keys and started typing, every now and then looking over at me in worry. The loss of Lacuna was a huge, bloody hole inside me, but Rampage had gotten me to bottle it up for now. When I got out, then I could grieve. Suddenly, the floor shook as there was an incredible boom somewhere below us. 1 pod down, 3 to go. Assuming, of course, that the warhead didn't decide to go off before the last pod did. I trotted to Snips, lowering my head to look him in the eyes, then gesturing for him to step behind the sentry. When we were out of sight, I said in a low voice, "Tell me everything about the talisman inside Rampage. Specifically." He sighed and looked back at the door.
There's not much to tell. We were focusing on getting it to work, then how it actually worked. It's a regeneration talisman. It has a magical template, and it restores the pony it's imprinted on. The idea was that it would contain the soul of the last pony it was imprinted on. Removing a soul from a pony in its entirety was fatal, but if the soul was still contained within the pony, that's the idea.
And you put it in razor wire first.
We put it in a half-dozen ponies first, terminally ill or injured ponies, but they were all too close to death for the talisman to work. Oh, there might have been some slight imprinting, but it didn't do what Rarity intended.
He coughed and looked aside.
The warden offered an alternative. He didn't know he meant to kill Razorwire. Please, believe me, we wouldn't have ever taken that step. The talisman almost worked, though, but she still died. Then the Angel of Death was captured.
And she shivered. That was one you killed.
I didn't. I never would.
He shuddered as he shook his head hard.
I don't know what happened. I just know that when Snails and I came to the lab in the morning, Rarity and the Angel...
He shook his head again, as if trying to physically rattle the memory from his mind.
When we got there, the Angel was dead. Rarity said that the Angel would never hurt any pony ever again, and then she insisted that we put the talisman in some pony who deserved it. The detective who captured the Angel was grievously wounded before her partner rescued her.
Soft heart. But the talisman drove her insane, didn't it?
Maybe,
Snip said softly, looking away from me.
The haunting effect of soul jars wasn't understood then. It still isn't, really. A soul jar is more than just an indestructible object. They want things, feel things, hate, love. The detective was already under a lot of stress, and if we hadn't gotten the haunting fully blunted out by then, it could have been the haunting effect that pushed her over the edge.
What happened next?
That's when we lost it for the first time,
Snip said, licking his lips and giving me a sheepish smile. Right. And how exactly do you lose a soul jar healing talisman? My question drew a mirthless smile.
Funny. That's exactly what Rarity said. But the detective, well, she was splattered by the train. Her body went to the Ministry of Peace, and they found the talisman. Saw it was perfectly undamaged, and somebody recycled it on the black market.
He licked his lips and looked away.
We spent 6 months looking for it. We have no idea how many ponies it might have been put inside. Healing talismans like that were generally reserved for very important ponies. But eventually it was found when a patient who was inside wouldn't die.
So there could still be souls hidden inside Rampage. Ponies who received the illegal talisman then grew increasingly unstable until they died, their souls trapped in the talisman. It was like a Silver Star sporting supplies that you could get stuck inside your chest. Wouldn't die how? I asked, fearing the answer.
There was a commercial sky carriage en route to Canterlot when a bomb went off. Prematurely, it's suspected. There were only a hoofful of survivors, most of the Pegasus team pulling it who could undo their harnesses. But there was one pony trapped inside the burning wreckage who was screaming. For hours. Rarity heard about it and immediately went personally to the scene of the crash. We'd been doing more research while the talisman was being looked for and had learned of the possibility that zebras are immune to telepathic magics through studies done in the MAS. Some mind control megaspells that they were contemplating to end the war that never really went anywhere. We've been hypothesizing that they could be helpful in stabilizing the talisman, and Rarity was so happy about getting it back. The very same day that the accident, we conducted an inspection to make sure the talisman hadn't significantly changed since we last saw it, and then Rarity sent it off to be implanted into one of the Predator.
Shuja, I said as I looked back at him.
You'd probably know better than any of us. Anyway, Rarity changed her mind the very next day, to our surprise. But by then, the operation had been completed and the zebra was heading back into the field. We considered retrieving it, but decided that would be more trouble than it was worth. If it still didn't work, we'd get it back when she died.
But then you lost it again, I said as I looked back at him. The unicorn gave an uneasy smile. Somehow it got from Shuja into Twist, and then Twist died. That turned his features grim as his glowing eyes dropped.
It may be that the Megaspell magic, combined with the souls trapped within, had an unanticipated side effect that created a pony called Rampage. A combination of good and bad in a single gestalt individual. A pony with no soul of her own, but containing the souls of almost a dozen different ponies.
Snips shook his head.
There's really no way to tell.
And Rarity wanted this, I hissed.
Rarity wanted her friends safe,
Snips countered.
She'd have done anything for them. The project she had us working on after she stopped the development of Phoenix Talismans was still for them.
And what was that? I asked, demanding the answer. I'm in! Xanth cried out from the door. I looked at him, then sighed. Answers about that for later. Now where to? He walked slowly towards the door, speaking to every pony.
We need to find the security center. It was on the far side of the armory. Look for a room with lots of terminals and monitors. We'll also need the guard captain's pass card. It's a wafer of blue sapphire. It should be fairly indestructible given all the enchantments on it. With that, we can access the security system. Also, keep your eyes open for vent access to get up to the warden's level.
I sighed and took cover by the side of the door. I still had a lot more regenerating to do, and nodded to Xanth. The zebra hit a key, and then there was a grind as the door slowly began to open. A klaxon warning every ghoul in the place that we were there. But I slowly poked my head inside and didn't see anything, flaming or otherwise. There was a stairway up that was marked Supermax, and then smaller doors. I frowned slightly, feeling a touch apprehensive about how clean the armory looked. Of course, as soon as we stepped in, another turret dropped and began to spray rounds at us. Instead of taking it, I took cover like a sensible pony and let Carrion step up and blast with his miniguns. A few seconds later, the turret was scrapped and Carrion had another dozen dings in his power armor. I went to a door beside the large window of ballistic glass and went to work on the lock. Fortunately, I got lucky and managed to pick it without too much difficulty. I pushed the door open, and the room on the other side was filled with a haze of smoke, and was it just me, or was it really hot in there? Most of us started sweating from the balmy air as I peeked through. I jerked my head back as the sentry rolled slowly past. Then I spotted another sentry in the corner, and a hissed softly in frustration. The armory robots had been spared exposure to the flames and were in brand new condition, unlike the sentries below. Xanth was at my side and tapped her chest a moment. Then she shimmered, her suit hushing as she all but vanished. The sentry slowly patrolled past again, and I saw a tiny door on its back open up. Then the machine buzzed out and called, "Error! Error! Combat inhibitor offline! Entering combat now!" I cursed and got ready to open fire, but the robot wasn't turning to face me. It was turning to the other sentries. "Warning! Warning! Hostile detected!" the other robot blurted. Their missile pods opened simultaneously, and I jerked back as explosions filled the room. A half-dozen blasts later, the sentry robot in the corner was still standing, but its armor was smoking and blackened. Rampage darted into the room, ducking under another missile, and smashed both her forehooves through its chest plate. The robot crackled pitifully as she smashed it repeatedly and yanked out wires with her teeth. Finally, it collapsed into a heap. Xanth reappeared. Her striped mane was scorched, but she was otherwise unharmed. She gaped at the scrapped robot, and I nudged her with a muzzle. "Not bad for a cursed zebra," I teased, and the ghost of a smile settled on her lips as she blushed. Those were the holding cells, but the locks in this section were actually pretty easy to pick. The half-dozen cells were empty save for piles of bones. Clipboards dangled from pegs beside the doors, and one caught my eye. Or rather, the name on it did. Doof. Assault. Weak isolation. Had been repeated 20 times on the page. I flipped back through the crispy papers. Half the names on the list of the cell were Doof. The interior barely had enough room for me. I couldn't imagine how tight the bulky stallion would have found it. I took a step inside and looked at the walls. Inside, from a light in the ceiling and a bucket in the corner, there wasn't much in there, but every inch was covered in crude sketches. One whole wall had been devoted to Macintosh's Marauders. I tried to guess who each pony was, but his talent clearly hadn't been art. I thought that one of the smaller ones was Echo, but I could only scratch my head and wonder who the other one was. Only they had a little sad face drawn upon them. Sadder still was the only large pony in the picture. On another wall was a list of names categorized as Trouble, Okay, and Cunts. I noticed Razor Wire's scratched out name under the last one along with some others. I flipped back through the pages of the clipboard, and there he was again, and again. From the dates on the clipboard, Doof spent half his life in this box, and the other in the slightly less cramped cells below. For 3 years. The last dozen names on the bottom of the uppermost sheet had dates scattering over a year. Most of the entries in general were for fighting, but in the last year there was the ominous addition of rape on the list as well. But oddly only in the last year or so. All the entries before that were for fighting. "What's so fascinating?" Rampage asked behind me. "Nothing," I said quickly, tossing the clipboard into the cell and closing the door behind me. Twist definitely didn't need to see that. "Come on, let's get going. Gotta get out of here soon." Then I was going to sit in Star House and cry for a week for Lacuna, and I wasn't going to move an inch till Rampage and I were better, no matter how I climbed the walls. My impulsiveness and fear had driven me from my friends and endangered others. Rampage gave the door behind me a look, then eyed me suspiciously. I gulped, then a pair of eyes, doors at the end of the row of cells popped open, and a sentry buzzed. "Alert! Alert! Intruders detected!" I could have kissed that hunk of metal, saved by the killer robot. 30 seconds later, the sentry was scrapped by our focused firepower, and the holding cell was left behind. I hurried forward into the next section, one that seemed to be mostly barracks. 20 bunk beds lay in 2 rows of 10. I saw the bathrooms and kitchens, but I didn't want to go anywhere near plumbing at the moment. The floor was already getting really warm, and the air grew more and more hazy as the smoke found ways to penetrate into the armory. I hurried through without stopping, continued through the break rooms, briefing rooms, and then a formidable door marked Gun Vault. I took one look at the lock and despaired. Maybe I'd find a key somewhere. I left a part of my heart back with that room as we continued on. Well, I would have if I had a heart. Figurative language was beyond me. Then I frowned as I heard the sounds of fighting and shouting in the next room. As carefully as I could, I limped forward with Xanth to the next set of double doors, and pushed them open enough to peek through. The room beyond was the largest yet. Some sort of big open mustering room, like the atrium back in '99, only not as tall. And it was full of ghouls in tattered guard uniforms who fought each other with batons. Bullet casings were scattered all over the place, along with discarded firearms. Every ghoul was screaming, glowing with radiation, beating each other to a pulp and then regenerating. Screams of traitors cracked from most of the throats. But who was a traitor to whom was never really clear. Graves had spent almost 2 centuries taking inventory. Had these guards really been fighting that long? Worse, on the far side, I saw a door marked Security Command. So, to get past dozens of ghouls who were eternally fighting to the death? Unfortunately, even as I thought that, Two of them immediately charged at me with feral screams. "Get the others!" I shouted to Xanth as they closed the distance, and I drew Vigilance and my sword. The blade intercepted one, halting its advance as it thrashed on the glowing edge, and I pivoted to the left to keep the other ghoul on the far side of its companion. Then I blew its brains out the back of its head with 3 rapid-fire shots. As the ghoul dropped, I swapped my aim and planted 4 more rounds in the head of another. Then I was nearly knocked off my hooves as the Pegasus guard dropped onto my back, hugged my neck, and started to chew into my throat. I stabbed with a sword, but it was hard trying to find something vital to chop into without cutting myself. I felt blood start to spurt as I tried to buck, but it was a lot trickier to do with only 3 legs. I heard shouts from behind me. I thought it was my friends. Hoped it was. Then I heard a crunch of a baton on skull over and over again.
"Let go of her, raindrops!"
croaked a mare as she struggled to pull the feral off. Finally, all 3 of us went to a tumble, but the ghoul was knocked free from my back. I pressed my foreleg to the bloody hole under my chin, and then balked at the sight of 2 ghoul Pegasus mares, one with blood in her mouth. I put the last 3 rounds in the magazine into the head of that one, panting for breath as I waited for the bleeding to stop.
"You a swat?"
The remaining ghoul shouted over the din, pushing me back towards the wall and away from the fight. SWAT? What the heck was... Oh, my armor. Well, I knew one answer that would save me a lot of questions. Sure, name's Blackjack.
"Oh, thanks, Celestia. It feels like we've been fighting forever,"
the ghoul said as she slumped. Her mane was a slightly clashing red and green, and her coat resembled spoiled milk.
"My name's Blossom's Fourth. I don't know what's going on. Some said the missile was part of some jailbreak. Others claimed we should have evacuated to the core. I haven't had a moment to think straight till you showed up."
It was just like with Silver Spoon. It seemed that ghouls had a tendency to get stuck on certain things from when they were alive. I'd better keep her in the fantasy, unless I wanted her to go feral. What's the situation here?
"Well, the alarms went off, and immediately we went down into lockdown. Prisoners were rioting. There was no communication from the outside, then the missile hit. Then Captain Sourcup said we were sticking tight, but others said we should evacuate. Then the captain pulled out his gun, and there were alarms going off and screaming, and some ponies went crazy. Shots were fired, and then it was batons and hooves and fighting for our lives."
She trailed off, frowning with a look of something amiss that she couldn't quite place her hoof on.
"Who was doing all the screaming?"
Don't worry about it, I said as I saw my friends run up. Looks like the rest of my team is here. We're going to arrest the warden and evacuate as many ponies as we can. My ass was starting to get toasty sitting on the metal floor. Don't worry about anything below us. It's taken care of. Silverspoon sighed and said in a low murmur,
"Blackjack, have you been lying to delusional ghouls again?"
I smiled awkwardly and shrugged, and the grey ghoul sighed and covered her face with a hoof. Clear the room. Headshots. If they talk to you, try and save them, I said, and Psychoshy groaned. I fixed the yellow Pegasus with an even look. I mean it. Give them a chance. Say you're with the SWAT or whatever you have to. Otherwise, take them out. Blossom's Fourth stared at me in shock, and I said with an apologetic smile, Sorry, we don't have much time left. Call out to your coworkers if you can recognize them. I loaded a fresh magazine into Vigilance, then frowned and worked the slide several times before it chambered the round. The work was brutal but short. Rampage, Stygius, and Psychoshy were more than capable of separating the ferals into workable clumps. If they talked, I put them behind me where Snips and Silver Spoon calmed them down. Xanth kept out of sight, though occasionally a feral dropped with bullets from nowhere. By the time we reached the other side, 10 guards remained, watching as I put down the last one with 3 bullets in my gun.
Special weapons and arcane tactics doesn't mess around,
Blossom's Fourth murmured to a twitchy-looking unicorn.
I could have been one of them,
he replied nervously, looking at the corpses. then looking at her, squinted and frowned.
You look like hell, Blossom.
He shook his head.
I feel like hell. And who the hell is screaming like that?
We're going straight to Hoofington Memorial, I assured them. There have been side effects from the warhead.
Going to be a trick, taking down the warden with the prison under lockdown and a fire,
Blossomsforth said as she looked at me with a little smile. Well, I did pass this room with those two loveliest words, gun and vault, on the door, I said with a sublime smile. I don't suppose any of you know where the key is? The pair looked at me and then over at Security Command. Well, if my previous experience were any kind of guide, the guard captain would be inside and be some sort of flaming apocalyptic demon of hell. I pushed open the door with my magic and slowly peered into the office. There were 2 desks in front of dozens of terminals, all of them showing different parts of the prison. At least half showed only static, but others gave a great view of the fire blazing up around medical and sweeping towards the armory. I wondered how long that armored warhead would last before going boom. No apocalyptic demon, though. Just a single Pegasus skeleton in a guard uniform slumped over the controls of a large security terminal with dozens of extra monitors and a pair of extra control panels connected to it.
Bones? Who leaves bones in the armory? What kind of sick joke is this?
The unicorn hissed nervously. He levitated the bones to the side and looked at the name tag.
Merryweather. But I thought she was in vacation. Why would somebody dress up a bunch of bones in her uniform? Just like I told you, something bad's going on, Twitchy,
Blossomsforth said with a scowl. She pointed at a key on one of the panels attached to the terminal.
That's the captain's key. Why would the captain's key be here with no captain?
And that's the key I need to be turned to get out of here? I asked Snips. The round unicorn nodded. I stepped up beside the body and noticed a few more details. A pistol between her hooves, a hole in the back of the cracked skull, and a grimy slip of paper. I worked it free and looked at the mouth-scrawled note. They have my girl. Sorry. Oh yeah, more Hoofington Sucks Doc reminders.
Something really bad's going on, isn't it?
Blossomsforth said as she nervously chewed her lower lip. Yeah, that's par for the course. Snips was investigating a large panel in the corner with the label Airshaft number 4 Access. Is that our way up?
Of course,
he said as he put his shears in the corner of the panel.
We still have 2 flyers. One goes up, finds the security station upstairs, turns the key there. Then we turn the key down here. Every pony but the flyer goes through the door. Then the other flyer pops open the shaft, and we all get out of here. Easy peasy.
He frowned as he pried the panel open. I felt more beads of sweat on my brow. Damn it, it was hot in here. The whole building was turning into an oven. Then I saw a tongue of smoke lick out on the edge of the panel. Snips? I warned as I eyed the metal. Now that I was paying more attention to it and not the drilling sensation throbbing in my body, I could hear a low roar.
Come on, get off!
And with one last heave, the panel came off and popped free. I heard the sudden intake of air, like the largest flaming pony ever taking a breath. Then a plume of fire exploded out of the gap. I tried to lunge, but misstepped and failed to knock him aside. The flame poured over his features like a flamer as he fell back, clutching his blackened face as he screamed. The ball of fire rolled over the ceiling like a hunting living thing and spread out as it dissipated. I rushed to his side beside Silver Spoon, and the squat blue pony's face was a blackened ruin. In the air shaft that was supposed to be taking us to the warden's office was a solid sheet of flame.
Well, think they're hot enough to make it up there?
Rampage asked, a stunned Psycho Shy. Heat, radiation, and enervation were nibbling away at us as we frantically tried to think of another way to get into the warden's office. Zan suggested we try to fix the beam gun and cut our way through. Blossomsforth suggested trying to fly up the central shaft and hoping the robots or beam turrets didn't dust us before shooting our way into the office. To keep the guards occupied and not acknowledging their ghoul status, I gave them the task of taking the captain's key and raiding the gun vault. "Well, what if I just stay here?" Rampage asked with a bright smile. "I mean, I've wanted to go out with a bang before. This place sounds like it's going to be one hell of a bang, right?" I was using my pitiful medical skills to apply a bandage over Snip's blackened eyes.
"If Blackjack has to face the warden, she's going to need you," he croaked,
his cooked face spitting and bleeding.
"You can't stay, but I can."
"I'm not going to leave you to die," I said firmly. He just lay there a moment, and I added, "You cursed me. I'm holding you to uncursing me."
"We already know I'm useless for that. Snails always made the connections in the end. It'll take him a while, but he'll figure this out."
He gave the smallest little smile.
"I'm not planning on dying here anyway. Once you get into the warden's office, you should be able to shut down the teleportation inhibitor talisman at the warden's security station. Not hard, just smash it. Then I'll teleport up to you. Easy as pie."
"You can do that." "Blind?" I asked, frowning in concern. He simply nodded. "It's already hot as hell in here," Psychosci said as she stared at him.
It's going to get even harder the longer all of you waste time," he said as he limped in the direction of the terminals.
I levitated the bones out of the chair and set them aside with care. Whatever had happened in here, it seemed Merryweather wasn't a willing compliant.
"Besides, I'm not much good in a fight now, but once the talisman is down, I'll be up there lickety-split."
Twitchy and Xanth trotted in, with the ghoul unicorn cursing the damned stripes while the zebra just ducked her head. Apparently, ghoulish obliviousness could go further than just being a ghoul. They had quite a haul on their backs. Shotguns, pistols, even a missile launcher. Okay, that brightened our prospects just a little. "You sure you can get up to us?" I asked in concern. "Maybe one other should stay with you? Just in case?"
"I can only teleport myself. Just get up there, get inside, and smash the talisman," he said as he slumped against the controls.
Twitchy put the key back in the slot. The blue glow spread out over the controls, then centered on the key. He coughed as the air grew hotter and thicker. The fire in the vent was like a furnace. Even if there wasn't anything to burn, it was still making breathing hard as hell. He turned the key, and a door to one of the monitors I was focusing on slid open.
"Hurry! You still have to find a way inside."
Missile launchers and missiles sounded like a good place to start. "Okay, let's go," I said as I took one last look at the blind pony slumping over the controls. I knew how terrifying it was to be blinded like that. The disorientation. He was certainly handling it much better than I had, though. Blossomsforth showed us the way. It was good to have a guide with an intimate knowledge of the prison. The stairs to the Supermax had 2 more turrets, but to my relief and delight they didn't start hosing us down with beam fire. Apparently, someone in our group had a talisman that marked us as friendlies. About time, some things started to go our way. So why was I getting so nervous as we walked up the stairs into that Supermax wing? The Supermax cells were of a different design. The blackened steel bars enclosed the walkways sat behind warped ballistic glass that kept out the swirling smoke. The cells had similar doors of reinforced glass that allowed nothing to be hidden inside. The sleeping mattresses looked glued to the floor and were all made of identical translucent material. Even the toilets were near plastic. Even more oddly, there weren't any ghouls within. All of them contained bones rather than the undead.
"I can't imagine what kind of sick zebra curse could do this. The radiation vaporized everything except their bones."
Blossomsforth scowled. The swirling cloud behind the glass were lit with a fiendish orange glow from below as we climbed higher and higher. The sentries that patrolled watched our movements with eerie silence, and I licked my lips, contemplating scrapping them now before the warden could override whatever safety we found with the guards. What the hey did you have to do to end up in these cells? Psycho Shy asked in low tones.
Oh, for these specialized prisoners. Prisoners who the MOM needed safe and sound for memory extractions and interrogations. Political prisoners, criminal organizers, traitors. Any pony that Pinky needed intact.
Blossom's fourth answered as we made our way down the row of cells.
We had to keep them secure from the rest of the prison, or else they'd be killed.
I slowed my pace a little and let Rampage get out ahead before I looked at the ghouls. Did you know a pony named Doof?
Oh, you mean Fork and Knives himself? Yeah, I did. Strange case.
The Pegasus said as she fluttered her crumpled wings.
I mean, I know he was a convicted rapist, but for a few years I didn't believe it.
How so? I asked, keeping my voice low.
He fought like hell in here. I mean, sure, yeah, he was a criminal, but he stood up for other ponies. He wasn't in a gang, though Celestia knows every pony wanted him on their side. He was just here. We threw him in solitary just to give him a chance to heal before putting him back out again. Every week he'd get beaten to shit, and every other week we'd lock him up.
Blossom's fourth said with a shake of her head.
Said he deserved it.
Yeah, I muttered, thinking about the waste of a potentially good pony.
Then he went bad.
Twitchy muttered as we kept eyeing the smoke.
Really bad.
How?
Doof wrote letters every day he could, see straight. He wanted to see this one mare, just once. Said he'd happily be locked up for the rest of his life if he could talk to her for just 5 minutes and tell her how sorry he was.
Blossom's fourth said with a small frown.
Never found out who, but I guess that one of her friends told him she'd never, ever, 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 ever speak to him again. Pushed him over the edge.
The ghoul shivered.
After that, we weren't locking him up to protect him, but to protect every pony else from him. Kept provoking us to put a bullet in him, send him to hell where he belonged. Finally, he got transferred out of here. Don't know where. Don't want to know.
And then they took in Angry, nay suicidal monster, and made him into a cyber pony of death. I really had to wonder about Silver Stripe's judgment on that one. I looked into the next cell we passed and then frowned. Huh. Blossom's fourth followed my look, and her dissected and battered wings popped out as she ran to the cell.
Cell 712. Shady Legs is supposed to be in there.
She looked at Twitchy.
Supermax confirmed full roll call this morning, right? No absences?
The nervous unicorn nodded.
Yeah, I heard Merryweather. Oh, sparkle farts, he murmured as we passed another.
Cell 722.
Another one. A breakout just before the missile hit? But nobody escapes from High Tower.
Blossom's fourth flew down the hallway, calling out,
731, 740, 755, 780. They're empty.
The ghoul swooped back.
Not just a breakout, a mass breakout.
Really? I found myself smiling. And no pony ever escapes from High Tower? The warden was gonna be pissed.
I need to see 755,
Carrion said at once as he flew up to Blossom's fourth. The mare looked at me in concern. I nodded to her, and she looked back at him and nodded in turn. You have 2 minutes, I shouted after him. If that didn't fulfill the terms of his contract, then too bad. I wasn't going to leave Snips down there a moment longer than we had to. Even with the ballistic glass, the air was getting pretty thin. As a test, I nuzzled said glass along the edge of the walkway and jerked my face back quickly. Okay, if it was that hot up here... 1.5 minutes, I amended as the rest of us hurried along. 755 was around the corner, and when we found it, I noticed to my dismay, that its furnishings were far more civil. The bed was a feather-down mattress covered in rumpled red velvet sheets, and it had a drape across the front window. Was it just me, or was it even larger than the other cells? There was a bookcase and a writing desk in the corner, and the toilet had another drape encircling it.
Wow, who knew Kingpin had it so good? But wow,
Rampage murmured as she looked at the cell.
Is that a mini fridge? How the hay did he get away with a mini fridge? The rules permit prisoners with good behavior to own a few personal items.
Yeah, that's like
a few photographs, not a mini fridge.
Rampage snorted indignantly and pulled the door open, staring at the bottles of wine.
Wine! That... Do you have any idea how many sex acts I had to pull for half a dozen cigarettes?
I looked at the red velvet drapes, not wanting to hear the answer. Carrion was staring at the room, too, at a loss. This wasn't a 2-minute job. It'd take an hour at least. Okay, every pony take a different spot. Strip it and dump it in my saddlebags. Stuff it in, I said as I magically levitated the sheets and wadded them up before stuffing it inside the container. I could handle the weight. I let my Pip-Buck inventory spell magically sort it all out and get them to fit. In 2 minutes, almost everything had been loose in the cells was in my bag, and I was near my carrying capacity. I made sure all the sheets were tucked inside the bulging pockets. I certainly didn't want them catching fire. Once the bed was uncovered, Carrion dragged his claws along the upholstery and sent fluff and feathers everywhere. If there was something useful in there, he'd shred it. Wait! Wait! I shouted and carefully waved my stump at him. He backed away and I levitated up the whole mattress of feathers and slowly sank my field and sent the feathers tumbling like snow. Nothing. I suppose it was too obvious. Rampage had raided the mini-fridge, tucking the wine bottles into her bags.
What?
She asked offensively as she popped open one and took a long pull off of it, before looking down at the label.
I'm swigging a France 712. This is a vintage that should be savored.
Then she appended the bottle and chugged it down, before belching loudly.
There. Consider it savored,
she said, smacking her lips. Okay. Let's get moving. Let's get that teleportation field down quick. I don't want to leave Snips down there a minute longer than I have to. I still don't see how you're going to get into the warden's quarters. There's no pony in there to turn the key, Legoshai said, then looked at Stygius. Stygius can only teleport where he can see, so unless the doors are ballistic glass too...
They're not,
Blossomsford added as we trot up along the stairs towards the highest level. Half of us were coughing from the smoke in the baking air. I didn't want to imagine what Snips was going through down below. Then, as if anticipating our troubles, there was a resounding explosion below us, and the swirling orange suddenly writhed madly as tongues of flame spread over the ballistic glass. Then I froze as I heard a dreadful cracking, splintering noise from my left and stared at the huge fracturing spider webbing through the warped glass. I watched as they grew by the second, then snapped across the entire plane with a brittle pop. Oh no. Run! I shouted as the weakening glass fell away from its steel anchors and tumbled in the inferno below. And instantly the corridor where we were in was transformed into a baking oven of swirling smoke. The heat was absolutely staggering. The smoke assailed my throat and chest with every breath. Cinders stung any exposed hide as the hot smoke curled around us. But perhaps worst of all was the sharp spike in radiation. For all that the smoke was shielding before, now a roaring fire seemed to fill the air with stuff that made my Pip-Buck click madly. There was one saving grace. My eyes weren't flesh and blood. Even the ghouls had shut their eyes against the cinders and stinging smoke, but I still had a few feet of visibility. Breathing was another matter, though. As I went from one pony to the next, screaming into their ears for them to bite the tail of the pony in front of them and then guide that tail into their mouths. In one ridiculous conga line, I led up the stairs and around to where the door where the warden should be. I could only hope that no pony The chain let go and got lost. Hot. No air to breathe. My skin scorched by fire, and my radiation popping up ridiculously fast. And worse, if I could sense our peril, the curse inside me began to tear like a wild rat roach inside my chest. All I wanted was to get out and breathe the cool, damp, smoke-free air of the hoof. Then I wanted to curl up with glory for the rest of my life. For a heart-pounding moment, I was absolutely positive that I'd screwed up again. Shouldn't we have been at the door by now? I wondered if my mane was on fire. I glanced back at where Rampage was biting my tail, but she wasn't burning yet. There wasn't anything to do but keep going, crawling along the supermax cells as my head spun. Too much smoke. Too much damned smoke. Was I going around in circles? I was. Wasn't I? Then I fell into a small alcove and looked around to see another massive door like the one in front of the armory, though this one had 2 monitors next to it. I staggered back as far as I could, croaked something that might have been "hold on" or "get clear," and used every bit of focus I could muster to lift the rocket launcher. I focused, aimed at the door, and pressed the trigger with my magic. The missile made a soft poof, popping out the end and then igniting with a brief whoosh that ended in a blast that showered me with debris a half-second later. I coughed as I advanced again. That had to have done nothing. Then, there was a smoldering black smear on some scratches in the middle of the door. Either I'd been too close, or, as I feared, the door was able to withstand any armament in the prison. I crumbled at the portal that might as well have been a wall, choking and retching, trying to get enough air for me to think. To buy time, I pulled the others all in one after the next, till every pony was accounted for. We had to do something. Some way to get inside. The only 2 people inside were the warden and Snails, and the doubted Snails had access to a monitor. That left the warden. The warden who was probably watching us choking to death at his door, glad to see another inspection team biting the dust. How the heck was I supposed to get him to let me in? I couldn't even see Silver Spoon as more of a vague lump. I'd need something more than us dying out here. Something that'd make us want to talk to us. Warden's gonna be pissed. I rose to my hooves and walked in front of the 2 monitors. The camera immediately focused on me. "Warden Hobble!" I shouted at the camera, barely able to hear myself over the ongoing roar of flames. The screen flickered. Then the warden's charred visage appeared. He looked positively shocked.
Oh, you're still here? I thought all of you were safe in the armory.
In the gloom, the sentries began to buzz.
"Intruders detected. Please present identification or be disintegrated."
Ah, well, that should do. Now, if you don't mind, I have a prison to get back under control. There were 2 ways about it. He had to be delusional. Kingpin escaped, I choked out, glaring at the camera. The charred ghoul paused, then looked at me with a long, steady stare.
"Pardon."
I reached out, grabbed Blossom's Fourth, and hauled the squishy Pegasus before the camera and monitors.
"It's true,"
Blossom's Fourth sprouted.
6 of the supermax cells are empty.
I looked at the other monitor, frowning in worry. Was Snip still there? Please, please be there.
"What kind of... this is... I should have been notified."
The warden sputtered as he looked at the side and back to me. I saw his eyes widen.
"No pony escapes Hightower. No pony!"
The warden shouted, slamming his hooves down repeatedly. "Open the door and I'll give you my evidence. Maybe you can catch him again," I said, hearing the grind of the sentries wheeling approach. The warden stared at me for what felt like an eternity.
"Oh, very well."
There was a buzz and a light lit up under the warden's monitor.
"Armory, let them enter."
Nothing. I started the little light, then at the blank monitor. "No. Please, be there. Please. Snips? Nothing. Then the lights flashed to life. There was another buzz, and then the heavy metal door opened with a whoosh. The cool gust gave us all the correct direction to go. Up the stairs. 10 seconds later, we were through, and the door closed with a bang. Most of us, ghouls and living alike, collapsed and concentrated on not cooking. Psychoshy wheezed and choked as she fell beside Stygius. I suspected that it was Xanth's suit that kept the zebra upright. Rampage coughed up something the consistency of tar. I wanted to do the same, but not yet. I staggered up onto my 3 legs and clawed my way up the stairs. The air in the warden's level was hazy but far more breathable than below. I made my way up to where the stairs opened into a security room. 2 sentries slumped, deactivated, and the turrets in the corner of the room were inactive. The warden, or something else. There was a metal door to the side, and I pushed it open to reveal a security terminal identical to the one below in the armory. The larger central monitor was focused down the shaft into the glowing fire. I looked at the controls and found one that said camera focus. I hit it repeatedly and saw the image change over and over again. Then it stopped on the image of the armory security station. I froze as I saw the form of Snips slumped over the controls. Where was the talisman? I couldn't see a magical talisman or anything marked teleportation, disruption, or anything. I did, however, spot a button that was marked intercom. I mashed with a hoof, and the roar of the fire blasted out over the speakers. Snips! Snips! I'm inside, but I can't see the talisman. Where is it? I shouted. He didn't move, and I put a hoof through one of the side monitors as I yelled into the microphone. Snips! Don't be dead! Tell me where the talisman is! He moved and lifted his bandaged face. Sweet Celestia was so hot in there he was smoking, cooking before my eyes. His hoof reached out, found the microphone on its little wand, and pulled it to his lips. On the roof, he rasped, barely audible even with the microphone against his mouth. I felt the world lurch around me. What did he mean, on the roof? Doesn't matter anyway. I was never smart enough to figure out how to teleport. You lied, I murmured. I lied, he said with a little nod. Some pony needed to stay here to buzz you through. If I hadn't, somebody else would have had to do it. I didn't want your friends to do it. I didn't want you to try and be noble and sacrifice yourself for us. And while you might have been able to talk one of the guards into doing this, I didn't want to take the chance of them going feral and every pony dying because of me. He shook his head as his hair smoked. I deserve this, Blackjack. No pony deserves this, I contradicted at once. The pain of the curse had spread out over my entire body, and my shock seemed to make it surge once more. I struggled to keep focus on the screen. My pain could wait till later. I do. Your zebra was right. I've tried not to think about it for 2 centuries, but Snails and I meddled in things we had no right to. Ponies were killed for us, or by what we did, he said as he bowed his head. I wasn't honest with all of you at the onset, but that's the wasteland, isn't it? If I'd trusted you, we could have done this better. Graves, Lacuna. They died because I forced us to go through here. And trust me, in 2 centuries, I've done plenty in the wasteland to deserve a burning. He hung his head as the glowing smoke and licking flames swirled behind him. You don't. Please. There has to be some way, I begged, trying to will all of this to not be true. There isn't. So listen. You have to get Snails out of here. And that's been all I could think of for 2 centuries. Get him out of here. You can help him. He can help you. He never screws it up. It might take him some time, but he gets where he's going. The blackened face gave a tired grin.
Tell him I cast the swirly curse from the Black Book. The swirly one. Swirly. Remember. Tell him I tried to get him out as soon as I could. Tell him that I'm sorry. I forgot the donuts. His bandages were smoking now as well. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgive you, I said as he curled up on the seat. The image flickered several times. Snips. The last image I saw before static filled the screen was a round, blackened, pony-shaped lump with a smoldering mane. I prayed it wasn't just my imagination that there was a smile on his face. I hit buttons at random, trying to bring up something, some confirmation that he was alive, that he could still be saved by some means. Maybe the warden would send a robot to pluck him to safety. Maybe the goddess would give me the magic to teleport him right into the inferno and pluck him out. The screens on the security station began to play all kinds of crazy pictures. Recordings, I guessed, since they showed parts of the prison whole and intact. The interspersed with the static of ruined cameras and blurts of recorded conversations. Most appeared to be interviews with prisoners. I spotted a sparkly hoofed garnet speaking with a fat white earth pony, but I didn't care. I had to find Snips again. Then I heard something that made me freeze reflexively. Though it had been weeks since I'd last heard it, the voice pierced my panicked denial and pinned me in place. Damn it, Vanity. I don't care what that cunt says. I want to see her. My eyes focused on the muscled mass with the angleless face. Even though he wasn't a marauder anymore, Doof still had the powerful physique of a pony who had worked out regularly. His gray hide was marred by tracks of scars. I'd never thought that those scars on Deus might have came from before he was turned into a cyber pony. Vanity sat on the other side of the table. His hooves folded before him. Use that word again, and this meeting is done, he said in cold finality. Doof shook with the effort to try and restrain himself. I'm here for you, not her. She says no, Doof. Respect that. The huge earth pony shook some more and then let out a little sob. I can't. Don't you get it? I'll have to see her, at least once. I have to explain what I did to her. Why? Please. He begged as tears ran down his scarred cheeks. Please, talk to her. Tell her I just want 5 minutes. After that, she never has to see me again. She's made her decision, Doof, Vanity said as he rose to his hooves. Respect it. Do your time and move on. Try to contact Twist again, and it'll be Apple Snack coming to tell you no. You sanctimonious rich fuck! Doof screamed at him, looking truly deranged in his anguish. You have no fucking clue what she means to me! I don't care, Doof, Vanity said with chilling hatred. You betrayed us. Have you forgotten that? You're not a pony. You're not even a zebra. I have respect for them as opponents. You're a rapist scumbag who should be locked up in here for the rest of your life. You have no right to judge me. I know how you fucked up Jetstream's head so bad she's in Happy Horn now. How are you any better, Vanity? How? He roared. And he rose and slammed his hooves on the table so hard it split down the middle. The door buzzed and 2 earth ponies ran in with unicorns behind them. Even as a team, they struggled to beat and subdue him. You think I'm a scumbag? I'll show you who I am. I'm a fucking god of pain and misery, you rich fuck. When I get out of here, no pony is going to stop me. No pony! I felt like I couldn't move or breathe for a moment, when that image of the screaming Doof being dragged out of the room disappeared, along with every other, and the warden filled the screen. Miss, I believe you said something about an escape. I could have also said something about a fire and a balefire bomb, but I doubted it would register. I do hope you will come in and elaborate. Immediately. On my way,
I said softly, dropping my eyes as the warden disappeared. A god of pain and misery. Funny. He could have been talking about me, and considering what he became. I wasn't going to be like him. I wasn't. I couldn't. The maiden is born of heartache and sorrow, and I know you suffer. She butchers all who oppose her. She sows destruction for the entire world. No. I swayed as I felt the curse tearing at me. It felt like I was falling away from my own body. Why the fuck shouldn't she think of you as Nightmare Moon? Ooh, why the fuck shouldn't anyone? Stop. Please. Please.
Hey! Came Rampage's voice from the door.
It moved slowly, like a zombie ghoul, and used her to pull myself back up.
Snips didn't make it, did he?
I couldn't answer, so I grit my teeth and nodded, tears cutting dirty lines in the suit that covered me. She sighed and shook her head. So, want to go through all the hating yourself and beating yourself up, or would you rather have some more bad news first? I looked at her standing there. She looked tired. More bad news. Why am I not surprised? She muttered. Psycho-shy and Stygius are really bad off. She won't wake up and he can barely stand. I think it was that smoke inhalation. Is she going to die? I asked as I turned and left the monitors behind. Left Snips behind. I'd punished myself appropriately when I had the whole butcher's bill for this fiasco. Maybe. If you want to keep that answer from being yes, we need to get the lockdown lifted and get the hell out of here. I nodded and walked slowly past her, feeling disconnected. Like something in me had finally given way, and now I wasn't completely sure if I was really doing this or not. Was this what it was like to lose your mind? Blackjack? I need to find the attic first. I need to find Snails. I owe Snips that, I said in a daze. Which way is the attic?
Oh, Snips! Rampage shouted. You don't know him anything. He should be glad I didn't buck his head clean off his shoulder when he couldn't remove that curse.
He wanted to help his friend, I muttered. She kicked me upside the head, knocking me sprawling. Oddly, the pain helped me focus, and I rubbed my aching skull as I looked back at her.
Are you saying that you'd curse a pony with a death spell you can't remove just to save one of your friends? Because if the answer's yes, then you're getting another kick.
I blinked up at her. Then she grabbed me in her hoof claws and hauled me up to look me in the eye.
I don't care if it's for a friend. I don't care if it's for me. There is shit you do not do. The ends do not justify the means, she said as she gave me another shake.
Then, the world went white. Once again, I was looking at Rarity's Canterlot apartment. The room would have done my room proud with the amount of clutter strewn about the place. Clothes, papers, books, and zebra stationery, and masks, all veyed to consume what had been a tastefully decorated living space. The glass case that had held parasprites was replaced by the black book. She stared down at it, turning the pages over and over again, as if searching for something amid the glyphs. It has to be here. Somewhere. Where is it? Show me! She murmured as her eyes, horribly bloodshot and puffy, moved erratically over the page. Beside her sat a small, pink egg-shaped talisman covered in markings rendered in golden wire. It pulsated with its own slow heartbeat. Then there came a soft knock at the door. Rarity ignored it. A second knock, barely louder than the first. Rarity huffed but kept working. Then there was a resounding thud as the door was knocked clear off its hinges and flew into the apartment. Rarity gasped as she turned to stare at the empty doorframe. A second later, a little white bunny hopped in and fixed Rarity with a stern glare. Fluttershy followed in after him.
Now, Angel, you really should give people a chance to answer the doors and not just knock them down.
She blinked and looked at all the mess, and then at Rarity.
I hope this isn't a bad time.
It is a bad time, Fluttershy, Rarity replied in a mutter, frowning at the other mare. Things are quite a mess right now. Without looking back, she levitated the talisman off the table and hid it in her tail.
Oh, well, I need to talk to you about something,
the Pegasus murmured, and Rarity actually grimaced.
It's 1 a.m, Fluttershy. Honestly, anything you need to talk to me about can wait until the morning,
she snapped briskly as she trotted to the door.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to,
Her voice dropped into a whisper.
What was that?
Rarity scowled. Fluttershy murmured again, a touch louder. Fluttershy, please! It's late and I have much to do!
I'm going to have to, in...
She gulped and finally spat out, Insist! The yellow mare sat in the doorway, tapping her hooves together, eyes lowered. Angel stood beside her, arms crossed and foot tapping rapidly to his side. Fluttershy! The Pegasus's determination seemed to startle Rarity.
Honestly, what's gotten into you?
She swallowed, then nodded at the little white rabbit. He grinned, his eyes and ears twitching as they went this way and that. Like a fuzzy missile, he launched himself at her terminal, dove under her desk, and emerged with a black plastic box trailing wires, and snapped it over his knee. Another swivel of his ear, and he leapt into a potted plant. A tiny sprite bot came buzzing out, but the rabbit flew through the air and exploded it in a single furious kick. Then he looked right at me and leapt up at me in 2 bounds.
Wait! That one's mine!
Rarity shrieked. Angel froze. Tiny fists curled as he glared at me, then looked at Fluttershy. The mare shook her head slowly, and the little animal huffed, then jumped away. His ears worked a few seconds more, then he nodded with a smug smile. Fluttershy took a deep breath and raised her teal eyes to meet Rarity's annoyed glare.
I got the report about the crash in the Canterlot Mountains. You're bothering me this late with that?
Rarity said with a roll of her eyes. The official report is coming off tomorrow. Zebra sympathizer sabotage. Nothing to bother yourself with. But Fluttershy didn't back down.
I got a notice from the emergency responders about something unusual. A pony trapped in the wreckage who wouldn't die, even as they burned.
She stammered and shuddered, her mane curling up tightly as it fell in front of her face.
They reported that he was trapped, pierced by crushed wreckage. Then you showed up, and he died soon after.
It was impossible for a white unicorn to get paler, but somehow Rarity seemed to manage it.
I just...
She forced a nervous grin, and her magnificent curled mane seemed to tighten as she fought for an explanation.
Really, Fluttershy, it's nothing. Nothing at all.
Angel pushed Fluttershy's mane out of her eyes, and she slowly looked up, then spoke in a quiet yet extremely firm voice.
It's not nothing, Rarity. Something kept that pony alive, burning, in agony, for hours. And there have been other reports, too. Ponies suffering horrible injuries or accidents and then taking far longer to die than they should.
Well, that's not a bad thing, Rarity stammered as she backed away. Death is a horrible thing. The absolute worst. Fluttershy bowed her head again.
Yes, it's horrible,
she nearly whispered. But then she looked at Rarity again and said,
But it's not the worst, Rarity.
Fluttershy, please. You can't tell me that death isn't the most horrible thing you can imagine, Rarity said, sounding stunned.
Think about Big Macintosh. and Pinkie Pie, and Applejack. Are you saying that us dying isn't the worst possible thing?
Fluttershy didn't answer, and Rarity slowly relaxed a little before the yellow mare answered softly.
I can imagine all kinds of terrible things. I've seen bodies sent to their families, heard their cries when they realize that a loved one is gone. I've seen children mourning dead parents. And I saw Applejack and Twilight at Big Macintosh's funeral. And there's no question that death is a horrible thing, and I hate it, but it's not the worst. I've seen worse.
Rarity glanced over her shoulder at the black book, then back at the bowed Pegasus. Her mouth worked, but nothing came out.
You want to know what's worse than death, Rarity? Suffering. Pain. I've heard ponies screaming in agony. I've held ponies as they struggled to take a breath, knowing that the next one would hurt them even more. I've seen ponies without a cut on their bodies go mad from the torment of what was happening to their loved ones. More than death, pain is the absolute worst possible thing. And fear of that pain is every bit as terrible as the pain itself.
Rarity just stared at her friend as tears ran down her cheeks.
Fluttershy, I don't want you to die. I think about it every night, and I can't face what will happen if I have to go to a funeral for you, or Twilight, or even Applejack. It hurts.
But then she smiled and brought the pink egg out from inside her tail. Fluttershy stared at the talisman in shock.
But I've been working on a way to keep you safe. To keep us all safe. So I've got it working right. None of us ever need to worry about that ever again. That's a restoration talisman. But it's been changed.
She stared at it and then at Rarity.
What does it do? Well, this is an incomplete one. But when activated, it contains a pony's soul, and then it can regenerate a pony from that soul. In theory, anyway,
she said, looking down at it.
We've had severe problems with the soul extraction process, but once we get the kinks ironed out, we...
Her voice trailed off as she noticed the horror on Fluttershy's face.
Contains a soul?
She asked weakly.
Well, yes. That helps power the magic. It takes quite a bit of it to restore a whole pony.
She looked at it a moment, then back at the black book before saying desperately,
But, don't you see? With this, you'll never die. You'll never be hurt again. Rarity, is this what you were working on in Hightower? Those patients in Happyhorn, were they test subjects?
She whispered in horror. Rarity didn't answer. She seemed frozen in place. Finally, she turned away, and now she was the one hanging her head.
They were criminals. The worst of the worst.
Fluttershy gave a little sob, pressing her hooves to her mouth as she sat back. Rarity then turned and gave a near-manic grin.
But, don't you see, Fluttershy? Don't you understand? Once we have these, the war is effectively over. They will never be able to kill us. We'll be safe. Forever.
Then Fluttershy lowered her hooves and slowly stood. Her eyes hardened as she stared straight at Rarity.
I don't want it.
Rarity blinked, and her mane slowly seemed to frizz before my eyes.
I beg your pardon? I don't want it. I don't want something inside me that sucks out my soul to keep me alive, she said in that quiet yet firm voice. You can keep it, and I know our friends will feel the same way. Fluttershy! Rarity gasped. Think of what you're saying! I could say the same, Rarity, Fluttershy said evenly, her stare drilling into the white unicorn. It doesn't matter how wonderful it is. I'd never accept anything that was made through killing people.
Rarity gave a hysterical little laugh.
That's rich for you, giving me that. You gave the zebras your megaspells for peace. Was that okay then? No, Fluttershy replied. The laughing unicorn grew silent as the Pegasus hung her head. No. I think I might have made a terrible mistake when I did that. And every day, I regret that I did. I know it was for peace, and I hope that somehow, in the end, it works out that way. But no, I was wrong then, just as you're wrong now.
Rarity's magic made the stone tumble in the air before her.
Do you have any idea what I've gone through to create this? For you? For all of us?
She looked on the verge of snapping completely, and for a moment I was certain she was about to cast some horrible spell on her best friend.
I know how many patients Happyhorn received from Hightower, so I have an idea. But I still do not want it, Rarity. I'd never want something like this, even if one pony died to make it,
she said as she reached out, took the talisman in her hooves and set it aside. Rarity looked like she was going to explode.
What I really want is my wonderful friend back, not some magic trinket.
She pulled Rarity into a brief embrace, then turned and trot out once more. Angel Bunny pointed 2 fingers at his eyes, then pointed them at Rarity, and then hopped out after Fluttershy. Rarity stood frozen in place for several seconds, looking at the designs and the papers and the talisman and the black book.
I thought she'd understand. I thought she could appreciate it more than any pony else. How dare she? How?
She lifted the black book and screamed at the top of her lungs.
I made it for you!
And suddenly the white unicorn was in a frenzy, her magic tossing and ripping the pages out of the books, splitting the sheets, tearing down the crates, and tossing the grotesque wooden zebra sculptures out the window as she moved like a purple-maned tornado of destruction. The sharp edges cut her fetlocks and smeared her forelegs with blood, but she ignored her injuries in her frenzy.
You said it would make them happy,
she roared as she swept the desktop clear of the black book.
You said it would keep them safe.
Then her magic surged, and she flipped the entire desk over in a crash of her art supplies.
Everything I did was for nothing,
she shrieked, and threw the black book with all of her might, sending it flying against the large standing mirror in the corner. It struck dead center and sent dozens of cracks radiating out from the impact. Rarity panted and gasped for air from the exertion.
I just wanted her safe. I just wanted... Oh, Fluttershy, what have I done?
She stared at the blood on her hooves. Then the white unicorn sat in the middle of a devastation she had wrought, head bowed as she wept. Rarity then looked up at the broken mirror and wiped her tears, smearing her cheeks in red before rising. Step by step she approached, looking at the broken reflection. She looked at the different shards of herself reflected back, counting softly.
42. Of course,
she murmured, then smiled faintly.
Silly Rarity. A present doesn't count if you didn't take it. You'd take it from some pony else. It only counts if it comes from yourself.
I lurched as the recording ended and tumbled over onto my back as my brain processed what I had just seen. Fluttershy had been right. It had taken Hightower and been separated from my friends to make me realize that. No data for EC-1101 was worth the death of my friends. I lay there on the floor for a moment and sighed. Learning sucks, I muttered as I sprawled there. I need to get to the attic. Those razor wire remember the way? Yeah, sure. Right down that way, Pink, Rampage said as she pointed with her hoof. Then she looked at me in concern. What exactly have you learned that sucks? She asked as she heaved me to my hooves. I paused and looked at her for a long moment. There isn't anything about Rarity that will set you off, is there? I asked bluntly, feeling numb and disconnected from myself. I have no idea. You tell me, she said as we limped together. So I did. She led me down a hall and around a corner, and I told her about Rarity's quest to become immortal and how she wanted to protect her friends and just what it cost. When the story was finished and the holes were filled in, Rampage wore a stunned and worried look.
Whoa. Learning does suck.
Told you, I said as I limped along. Blissful ignorance. That's the ticket. I was so blissful before I knew any of this crap.
Really?
Rampage replied. I thought life in 99 sucked. Compared to Hightower right now, that sucking was bliss, I replied with a smirk.
Whine, whine, whine. Who knew being a hero involved so much whining?
The striped pony said with a faint smile, but it quickly died.
So, I'm just a magic talisman crammed into too many pony souls?
And one zebra, I added. Whatever Predator did change, their stripes must have involved some sort of soul-affecting magic somehow. That's why you've got them too.
Wow. Don't know why I'm so keen to die. I've never born in the first place. I was built.
She shook her head back and forth as she walked, groaning.
It's way too late to go back to just thinking I'm a pony with no memory, isn't it? I mean, even alicorns were once ponies, right?
I think so. Twilight used magic to change them into what they are now. Somehow the goddess can do it too. I didn't want to know more details than that. I had little bits of goddess in my brain, and that was already more than I wanted to know. You're still Rampage. That made her laugh, and not in a particularly nice way.
Oh well, that's just fine then. Rampage, who can't have a kid because she's got a little psychopathic foal killer inside, along with the punk, the professor, and Predator, and whoever else is in me, she said, gesturing to herself. I like Mentols. Is that because of Twist inside me? Huh? Is it because Octopus was popping them on the sly because he was losing his marbles? What? Nothing about who I am makes sense. I sighed and sat, patting her shoulder with my remaining forehoof. Well, at least you're in good company. I paused as I looked down the hall at a pair of double glass doors. Garage was printed above them. Some kind of blast barrier had been dropped behind them, cutting them off. That wasn't what shocked me, though. It was the tiny purple figurine lying on its side beside a metal door next to the pair. Slowly, I approached, step by step, till I reached out with my magic and picked up the teeny tiny figurine of Twilight Sparkle. I slowly turned it over in shock. 5 breathless ponies in the back of my mind squealed in glee. I stared at the inscription on the base. Be a brainiac. Huh? Then Twilight Sparkle's head fell clean off. I was so shocked that I dropped the figurine and it shattered into 100 of ceramic pieces at my hooves. I was a what? How? That wasn't supposed to happen. A tiny Applejack in my head consoled a sobbing Pinkie Pie. I looked over at the metal door and pushed my way through. What I saw on the other side stopped me almost immediately. Mares. Thousands of them. The ministry mares predominated in dozens of different poses. Many of them were unpainted, powdery white things. Others were cracked or chipped. There were also lots of figurines of Trixie, of Silver Spoon and Twist, of Snips, of Applebloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle. There were countless inscriptions, many misspelled, or others odd. I picked up one of Snips and saw the words beneath it. Best friend. Nurse Graves had withstood enervation by counting inventory. Blossom's Fourth by fighting, and the Warden by being an evil bastard. No guess how Snails had endured. I walked past the shelves and pottery bench, and a machine that looked like it was designed to pulverize the clay back into powder. There were countless empty glaze jars, laying in heaps and piles around the work table. Beside that was an electric kiln. And then I heard sobs in the next room over. Hello, I called out as we walked past the workshop and towards a door in a large room beyond. Please don't be crazy, I murmured as I slowly walked forward. This room had a bad vibe to it.
For the first time since starting my climb to Hightower, the air felt chilly against my hide. The scream of enervation was different here, more focused, almost like it was countless voices calling out in unison. The floor to the room had been carved with strange markings that looked like zebra glyphs, and yet at the same time they were an odd difference that gave them an air of something wholly other. The markings on the floor gave the inexplicable impression that they were meant to be felt rather than viewed. Holes were punched into the floor within the designs, and when I knelt down, I could see red fragments of gemstones in the voids. There were all kinds of strange symbols on the walls, diagrams and designs, some crossed out and others annotated with circles and comments. This was where Project Eternity played with necromancy. "Look at that, Blackjack," Rampage said as she pointed at the diagram of a pony with a black ball of swirling shadow above it. Beneath a pony was written the question, if a soul is infinite, can the soul be split indefinitely? Split a soul. I stared at the diagram, and everything faded into white once more. "Mrs. Rarity, are you sure about this?" Snip said as he stood in the middle of the workroom in a ridiculous black cloak and robe. "The Black Book doesn't say anything about cutting a soul in two, rending and destroying one, okay. Cursing a pony to shatter their soul and scatter it, yeah. But slicing it neatly in two? I don't think the book sees much point in just two pieces."
"That's why it's an experiment, darling, and hopefully one of our last. If this doesn't work, well, I'll just have to try and make the best one I can."
Snips looked up at her in confusion, but then dropped his eyes from the glamorous mare. She wore a dress of the darkest purple, barely a shade away from black. She walked through the workroom and into the ritual chamber. My view swapped from one room to the other, and followed them. I noticed that most of the notes had been cleared away. Another unicorn, tall and lanky, and wearing a similar black robe, nodded to them. In the middle of the room was a gray pony I'd seen before. Octavia stood in the center apprehensively, hugging her contrabass and bow like they were a comforting blanket.
Ministry Mayor?" she stammered. "Please, call me Rarity,"
The white unicorn said as she smiled gently.
"I understand that you've fallen on some hard times, and I'd like to help you out. But first, you need to help me, Octavia. You see, I'm trying to try out a spell. It's something that's never been done before."
She put her hoof around Octavia's shoulders and gave her a hug.
"But I want you to be okay with helping me. I don't want you to help and leave with the bits I offered."
The gray pony frowned, but looked back at the white mare.
What will it do?" "We are going to take a piece of your soul, cut it off, and put it into your instrument there. If it works, your instrument will last, well, forever. That piece of you will preserve it for all time." "My instrument?"
Octavia looked at it, then at Rarity.
"Will it hurt?"
I realized, listening to her, that Octavia spoke with a slight accent, an odd, sophisticated-sounding one. Actually kind of like crumpets, but with less swearing. Rarity was sympathetic.
"Probably, but it's something we need to test. I need to make sure it works." "Is it for the war, ma'am?"
Octavia asked with a little frown.
"Are you going to use it to make weapons?"
Rarity looked at her for a moment, then smiled and shook her head.
No, this is for me and my friends. I'll never use what we learn here for the war effort. In fact, when it is finished, I hope to seal it away forever."
She locked eyes with Octavia.
"I swear, on my life and soul, that I won't use it for the war."
Octavia's eyes dropped to her instrument, gazing questioningly at the still wood, then closed in silent contemplation. A moment later, they reopened and focused on Rarity.
"Very well, ma'am. I accept."
Thank you, Rarity said, and then she stepped back outside the circle. Snip stood on one side of the circle and the lanky pony, presumably Snails, on the other. Snips lifted the black zebra-hide book and began to intone words that didn't sound like they could come out of a pony's mouth. Even more disturbingly, though, was the flat monotone he spoke them in. It was far too similar to the humming I'd heard the Harbinger camp outside Flank sing. Too similar to the Innovations scream. Octavia began to lift off the ground along with her instrument. Her eyes clenched tight, limbs shaking as they clutched the contrabass. Yet there was no glow of unicorn magic. She rose aloft as if lifted by the shadows themselves. A flickering vortex of magic seemed to rise up from the center of the sigil and coil around her, as if wrapping her in a dark cocoon. Then the screams began. They sounded from Octavia, but I'd been in Hoofington for too long. Those screams were from the shadows as well. Then a dark orb of energy gathered at each of the two unicorn stallions' horns and flew into the air. They struck the cocoon of shadow in unison, and that arcane envelope exploded in two immense fans of prismatic light. Outward they arced, and then they plunged back down. One funneled into the mare's body, the other into the wooden bow and paneling of the contrabass. Octavia slumped as the vortex dissipated, and she dropped towards the floor. Rarity's magic caught her and laid her gently down. The gray mare hugged the instrument as she sobbed.
What happened?
Snips asked as he trotted around Octavia.
What happened? Did it work? Did we actually split a soul?
Huh? Did we?
Yeah. Is she okay?
The lanky tail Snails drawled.
We'll find out,
Rarity replied tensely as she looked over Octavia and then back at Snips.
Check the book again.
Snips flipped it open and leafed through a few pages.
Oh, will you look at that? Looks like the big black book's got a few ideas on splitting souls all of a sudden.
He peered at the yellow material.
Mostly involving torture, but it's got some other things too.
I thought it might. Horrid thing. Well, I have some ideas of my own.
She knelt and nudged Octavia.
Come on, dear. Wake up. Please.
So, how do we know it worked?
Snips asked with a worried frown. Snails pursed his lips, then looked at a workbench at the edge of the room, floated over a sledgehammer, and smashed it repeatedly on the laddered wood. The surface was untouched.
Looks like it worked, eh?
Octavia's eyes jerked open, and slowly she sat up. What happened?
I was hurt, and then I feel odd.
She struggled to her hooves.
I want to go home, please. Please let me go home.
Rarity looked at Snails and smiled gently.
Please. See her home. Make sure she's paid in full.
Snails blinked, looking at the floating sledgehammer and quickly tossing it aside with a bashful look.
Don't worry. I'll get her home, eh?
He looked at her and smiled slowly.
You live in Ponyville, right?
Frankfurt,
Octavia stammered.
Oh, well, same diff, don't you know? Come on,
he said as he trot languidly out with Octavia at his side, contrabass resting along her back.
Sweet! Stop by Sugar Cube Corner there and get a box of donuts to celebrate.
Snip shouted after them. Then he looked up at Rarity.
Woohoo! It was a success. What are we going to do next?
We'll have to test it out a few more times, now that we know that splitting a soul isn't lethal.
Then she floated out a tiny ceramic figurine. It was one that I knew quite well. I had its copy in my saddlebags. Rarity looked down at the tiny replica of herself.
Then, when we can do it without mistakes, I'll make a set of me and my friends.
Snip stared at her.
You're gonna put a piece of your friends in each statue?
Wow. Will they let you?
No to both,
she said as she pulled out a mirror and gazed into it with a frown.
But I have an idea that ought to be every bit as good as using my friends.
She put the mirror away with a clear shudder. It would be impossible, or possible, to take a fragment of a soul and copy its unique magical properties of another. Snip scratched his head, looking at the book, and then said skeptically, "Well, yeah, but only if you like pieces of your soul going poof." Then his eyes popped wide. "Oh, I get it. You're gonna snip off some felon's soul and make them like your friends. Clever." He trotted out of the room, the black book hovering in front of him. "I'm gonna see if I can find anything else new in here." Rarity stood alone for several minutes, standing where Octavia had been minutes before. I was beginning to wonder why I was still being shown this. And then she said quietly to herself, "No, Snips. No more sacrificing other ponies. I'm going to use my own. Besides, it's not a gift if you take it from some pony else." I was pretty sad that I was getting so used to the visions, flashbacks, and other things messing with my perception that I didn't face plant into the middle of the ritual circle. As it was, I made a sharp little pirouette, keeping on my hooves before sitting down hard. Octavia. Rarity had split Octavia's soul right in two, and part of her soul was inside her contrabass. No wonder I could play it so well, or that Vanity had been able to beat off a mob with it without the instrument being scratched. It was so obvious. Why hadn't I thought about it before? I hung my head, remembering how sad Octavia had been at the end of her life, and how beautiful her music was in contrast to the ugliness of the wasteland, where beauty of any sort was hard to come by. Maybe it was impulsive of me. Okay, most things were, but still. I opened up the panel of my Pip-Buck. I selected all the audio files from Octavia's apartment and then activated the broadcaster. "Hi. I don't know if any pony can hear this, but this is security. I want to share something with you. 2 centuries ago, before the bombs fell, there was a musician named Octavia. I don't blame you if you don't know the name. She took a position against the war, stood up for peace, and was ruined for trying to do better. But she never gave up. Even towards the end of her life, she kept trying to make the world a better place. I have some of her music with me. I know that you might have heard it already from DJ Pony, but I'd like to share it with you now anyway. Please, I hope you enjoy it." And then I set the Pip-Buck broadcaster to broadcast her music as far as I could. I doubted any pony would hear it, but at least I felt I'd paid back a little of the gift her music had given me. But then Octavia's music began to slowly cry out of the speakers of the prison. I must have gotten lucky on the frequency or something. It was a requiem for Hightower. And then, several seconds later, I heard a humming noise. I looked over at Rampage, who seemed lost in the tune and her own worries. Slowly, I turned and began to stalk the source. In the corner of the room, I found a tiny cot covered in a heap of dirty rags, behind drums of porcelain powder. I looked over at the filthy, dust-streaked black cloths as they hummed along with the low melody, then said quietly, "Snails?" "Get away," he muttered. "Snails? I'm Blackjack. I'm here to take you out of here," I said as politely as I could. I didn't want him to go feral. "Snips sent me." The regs curled up. "He's dead, isn't he?" I moved next to him and sat down beside the cot. "Yeah, he is. A lot of ponies died helping him save you. He spent a real long time trying to get to you, to get you out of here. Now we have to go," I said as I put my hoof on his shoulder. I couldn't tell if the pony under the rags was a ghoul, a mutant, or something else. Not even the eyes were showing. "Please, he wanted to get you out of here. He says he's sorry for not bringing the donuts." The rags sniffed and shifted, and Snails sat up. The pony beneath them was much like the pony I'd seen in the vision. a middle-aged unicorn stallion with an orangey coat, and like Snips, his eyes glowed with a soft luminescence. He had a pair of figurines in his hooves, ones that Snips and himself as younger stallions, maybe even before the war. Bestest friends read the inscription on the former, besterest friend on the latter. Around his neck, on a frayed ribbon, was a tacky little medallion of 3 shooting stars. The gift had rubbed off some of the corners, and it was still inscribed with Best Magic Act.
You're his friend?
Snails asked slowly as he sat up. I guess you could call me that. I was trying to help him, and he was trying to help you. So now I'm trying to help you. I guess that was friendship, sort of? Technically? He, accidentally put a curse on me? The swirly one? Snail's glowing eyes scowled in thought, and I gave a hopeful smile. He said you'd know how to remove it.
The swirly one? I don't know. I don't think you can remove that one, because it's all swirly and spreads till it pops you right out of your body. The orange pony scratched at his matted mane. I can, well, nope. But maybe, no, that probably wouldn't work. But maybe,
I was struck by the horrible revelation that my life and soul were in the hooves of Equestria's slowest necromancer. Rampage then spoke up behind me.
Hey, Blackjack. Not sure if you've noticed, but things are getting smoky up here. We can't have long till that warhead pops. We've got to get out of here.
Oh, you can't do that,
Snail said with a shiver.
Warden said he won't let any pony go, 'cause we're in, lockdown. Been in lockdown for, like, ever.
He looked off to one side.
And Warden's a monster now. I mean, he's got those robots, and he's a big and fat and glowy, and yeah, not happening. Not till the Warden wants you to.
Have you seen him?
Oh, yeah. Asked if I could go find Snips or Miss Rarity, but he said no. Cast a bunch of spells on him too, 'cause he needed to be able to control the prison. Said he has orders and that none of the scum were to get out.
Snips looked away.
He's sort of big and scary now, so I just stayed in here with all my friends,
he said as he looked over the figurines.
Clay's nice and easy and doesn't mind if you're slow. In fact, Rarity said that made me better than any pony for working it. Just gotta be careful.
Right. Okay. Does the Warden have anything else in there? Robots? Turrets? I asked Snails as I looked at the figurines. What was Rarity doing with all these little statuettes? They were nothing compared to the 5 I'd collected in the wasteland. They all looked so dead.
Oh, yeah. He's got it all,
Snails said with a little nod.
and he's big too,
he reiterated earnestly, as if hoping it'd help. Right. Big, scary, turrets and robots. Well, we've dealt with all those before, I said with a sigh. Does the Warden have a terminal or something?
Oh, yeah, right by his desk. A big, fancy one. Controls everything in the prison.
Snail said, nodding as an idea began to form in my head. So we don't need to beat the Warden. We just need to occupy him long enough for a certain zebra to get to a terminal and lift the lockdown. Then we blast the terminal, run for our lives, and let the balefire bomb finish him off. I grinned at Rampage. Okay, let's get back to the others. Snails blinked slowly at Rampage.
Do I know you?
She rolled her eyes.
Part of me. Don't worry about it. Welcome to the Blackjack and Company Traveling Freak Show. Remember to shoot Blackjack. It's good luck.
Do not shoot Blackjack! I contradicted at once as we started out. Snails gathered up a few trinkets and things in his raggy black cloak. It didn't take very long. Fortunately, the skinny stallion wasn't slow-moving, just slow-thinking. What was Rarity doing here, though? Rampage asked as we trot out of the ritual chamber, looking at all the figurines.
Nothing. She just split her soul into 43 pieces. She put 42 of them into the figurines. The last one she kept. I know because I made sure it got back to her, and that was the brightest and shiniest part of all,
he said with a clear pride, but otherwise as if he was mentioning that it was raining. It halted me in my horseshoes, though. 43. Rarity split her soul into 43 pieces? Octavia's scream of agony was fresh in my memory, and that had merely ripped her soul in half. How could any pony have survived something like that? I accessed my inventory spell and wiggled free the Fluttershy statuette. You're telling me there's a piece of Rarity's soul in here? He took it in his magic, then calmly smashed it down against the ground. If I had a heart, it would have stopped. The figurine, though, was completely unharmed, save for a little bit of dust on her pink mane.
Yup. Well, it was a piece of her soul, but then she copied some of Miss Fluttershy over it. She was such a nice pony.
He looked at the inscription and blinked, then flushed.
Oh, supposed to say, be pleasant. Oopsie.
43 pieces. But why? I stammered. Blackjack. Balefire bomb going off. Swirly curse killing you. Imminent mortal doom. The striped mare gave an apologetic smile at Snails. You've got to excuse her. She gets distracted easily by the motivations of ponies who died 2 centuries ago. Makes her overlook the little things. Yeah, I muttered, trying to get my head back in the game. Still, a part of me wanted to know. Come on, maybe we can get lucky and talk some reason with the warden. It was possible, right? We rejoined the others. Psycho Shy was barely conscious and struggling to breathe. Stygius slumped beside her, glaring up at me weakly. Too much smoke, he'd scribbled on his slate. Xanth was still in her hooves, but looked exhausted and slightly befuddled. Bloomsforth and the others were trying to care for them as best they could, but there simply wasn't much they could do. Silver Spoon immediately trot forward to Snails and smiled.
Hey, long time no see.
He blinked in confusion, and then his glowy eyes popped wide. Spoon? But you're, wow.
Yeah, and twists inside her.
Silver Spoon said, pointing a hoof at Rampage, who scowled back.
It's a regular Ponyville reunion.
Bloomsforth blinked as she looked at Silver Spoon in surprise.
I'm sorry about Snips,
Silver Spoon continued.
He didn't make it.
Did he really come all this way to save me?
Snails asked slowly.
Yeah, he actually cursed Tiara to keep her from leaving. Totally crazy, she replied.
Tiara's here?
He asked, looking around nervously. Silver Spoon dropped her eyes.
Well, no, I mean, Blackjack. I get him confused, but, I mean, if I'm here and you're still here, maybe Diamond Tiara is somewhere out in the wasteland.
Xanth, I said to the zebra as the two ghouls talked. I need you to do something. We're going to deal with the warden, and I need you to get this terminal to lift the lockdown. Can you do it? She muttered something in zebra. Is that a yes or a no? She muttered something else, equally inexplicable. Xanth! I snapped, and her eyes focused on my mane. Right. Lift the lockdown? Warden's terminal. Sure. Easy peasy. I'll see. I wasn't sure she was quite with it, but she was our best chance. I turned to Bloomsforth. Soon as it's lifted, get to the garage. Get ready to get every pony out of here. Understand? Soon as it gets lifted, we're coming running. I looked at Carrion, who'd swapped out one of his miniguns for the Xanth jury-rigged beam, which she had apparently gotten working again at some point. Really, how many times has she patched that thing up? Ready, soldier? He smirked and saluted. Ready, Reaper? Rampage still looked troubled, but she met my gaze with a little smile and nod. Ready? Zebra? The striped mare gave a little grin and babbled something in zebra, but saluted smartly, and then gave a surprised look at the hoof at her temple. Then Stygius hauled himself to his hooves and tapped his chest. You sure? The charcoal bat pony nodded once, flying over next to me. That was good enough for me. I looked at the ghouls. The rest of you, make sure you get to those wagons and are ready to get us out of here.
Wait,
Sakoshai croaked out as she fought to her hooves.
not gonna just sit this one out.
Then she started coughing and wheezing as she swayed. Snails and Twitchy helped keep her upright as she struggled to join us.
Not letting you fight without me.
She pleaded as she looked at the ebon-winged bat pony. Stygius flew back to her, held her by her shoulders, and shook his head. She coughed and looked him in the eye.
I'm good in a fight. Just give me a second.
He shook his head again, and she glared at him.
Don't you tell me no. I'm capable of kicking as much flank as...
Then he silenced her with a hoof-curling kiss. Her blue eyes popped wide, and then her buttery wings fluttered at her sides. Slowly, she swayed and finally sat down hard. Stygius moved with her to keep contact, and closed her eyes as she smiled in bliss. Imminent mortal doom, people! Rampage muttered beside me. When he finally broke the kiss, she blushed hard and smiled.
Oh, wow.
She muttered, then sighed, looking back up at him.
You'd better make it back then. Here,
she said as she pulled off her power hooves and patched them to the armored buck.
Bring them back. Understand? I plan on using them myself. I mean, it.
The stallion nodded, and I helped him put the weapons on with my magic. Next, we drank the rest of our recycled rat away. I made sure the AM rifle and missile launcher were both accessible on my back, looked to the others, and nodded once. Side by side, we walked back down the hall towards a pair of double doors marked Warden. You know, this is going to be really anticlimactic if he just lets us go, Rampage muttered. Have we ever had that kind of luck? I replied. She snorted and grinned. We've gone through hell together, and I'm quite done with this fucking tower. Time to finish this. Graves, Lacuna, and Snips wouldn't have died for nothing. Sure, if I could occupy him with chatter, hey, worked for me. Then I pushed the doors open by magic and stepped through. Over the speakers, an ominous melody began to play. The warden's office was a large roof with a vaulted ceiling. 4 hovering robots with monitors lurked in the corners. Almost immediately noticeable, though, was the floor. It wasn't cement, wood, carpet, or metal. It was thick glass between heavy steel beams that formed a grid. Smoky plumes shot up like little geysers. As we walked, my eyes were drawn downwards. The smoke made the strangest swirling motion, outlined a central void that went all the way down to the inferno below. I could see the missile and its armored warhead. It was glowing in the heat. But where was the warden? There was nothing else in here except for a huge pile of junk piled up in the center of the office. There was nothing else. And then the pile moved. It slowly rose up, looming higher and higher as it twisted around to face us. There were a reason the screens had only shown Warden Hobble's face. It was all it could fit. 2 centuries of direct exposure to the warhead had caused the ghoul to swell to Goliathan proportions. His hips were trapped within the warped center of the glass floor, his rear legs dangling 20 feet below, draped in glass stalactites. The blackened undead flesh erupted predominances and corneas of blue flame in magmatic floors that healed mere instants later. The desks and furniture and a half-dozen sentry bots had been fused into a carapace-like armor that vaguely resembled some sort of uniform. The thing's mouth split in a volcanic grin as he stretched his forehooves wide, and then two great skeletal wings wreathed in flame spread from one side of the room to the other. Behind him, set into the wall, was a large, complex terminal. Celeste only knew how the gargantuan monster used it. He leaned towards us, his eyes narrowing.
You lied to me. You're not with the MOM. The riot, the fire. This is some kind of elaborate deception, a plot against me. Yes.
I swallowed, baked in the tremendous heat coming through the foot-thick glass. I hoped it was magically hardened or something, because I really did not want to sink through the floor. Regardless of any hardening it might have had, though, it was searing hot, and I was truly glad to have cyber limbs right now. I might have been leaving hoof prints of stinking melted rubber, but that was just an unpleasant heat were the only things that I had to deal with. Rampage trod in without hesitation, just wrinkling her nose in discomfort as her hooves sizzled. Now I was really glad Xanth had her soul armor, though the sight of the abomination had brought her out of her daze and left her staring up at it in horror. Please don't forget about the mission, Xanth. There is a deception. Yes. One you're playing on yourself, Hobble, I said, swallowing as I saw the Gatling beam guns from the sentry robots mounted on each of the warden's forehooves. You're not a warden of a prison anymore. This place is a ruin. There is no Equestria anymore. There hasn't been for 2 centuries. I gestured at him with my stump. Look at yourself, Hobble. Look at what you've become. He roared back.
Spare me your lies. I have no more patience for this. I will have order. I will have control. This is my prison, my empire, my world. You have no place in it.
So much for him just letting us go. The warden swept his forehooves wide, and a half-dozen beam guns sprayed out in a storm of fire across the office. Rampage charged straight ahead across the glass floor, her steel-clad hooves smoking as she crossed the distance, leapt and locked all 4 hoof claws into his armored chest. Carrion launched himself up above the glittering arc and sprayed down both the cutting emerald beam and minigun fire. Stygius shadow flashed again and again, zigzagging closer and closer, and then finally bringing his burrowed power hooves, smashing against the warden's head with a satisfying crack. Xanth stood there agape. I tackled her and dropped under the Gatling barrage. The glass baked me through my barding, and I looked at her in the eyes and screamed, "Get to the terminal! Lift the lockdown!" Her eyes focused on me, and she blinked, swallowing in terror, and disappeared. I turned and rose to my hooves, shielding my face with my stump. The bolts burned, but I'd take more than a fancy light show to turn me into a pile of dust. I brought up the missile launcher, and as a flurry of shots passed above me. His blazing wings swatted at Stygius, but the bat pony shadow flashed away, and half an instant before the burning skeletal wings could catch him. One giant hoof smashed at Rampage, trying to scrape her off, but the armored Reaper refused to be flicked away so easily. The other hoof was pointed at Carrion. There! I jumped into Sats and launched the missile right at the outstretched hoof. The projectile streaked, exploded in a fiery blast on the end of his foreleg. One of the beam weapons even sparked and blew apart completely. The intact limb stopped trying to scrape Rampage away and pointed at me as I flipped the launcher open and fed it another missile. The beam spray bit into the reinforced combat armor and even struck hide, but I turned aside, sheltering the launcher as I finished loading and snapping the weapon closed. Only then did I turn, jump into Sats again, and send another missile streaking at the other hoof. "Take out his hooves, Carrion!" I shouted as the rain of crimson light slackened immensely. I just didn't have the speed to run and dodge with 3 hooves. But I was a tough fucking cyber pony. Carrion changed his target immediately, and he was quite capable of banking and evading the warden's fire while still pouring out his own shots at that outstretched limb. Then Rampage reached a part of him that wasn't so covered in steel, his face. Her glowing white-hot hoof claws sank into his back, a black-charred hide with little explosions of fiery ichor. Now the warden let out a roar as the mare went into a spiked frenzy, trying to claw and dig her way into his fiery eye. He lifted his hooves towards the Reaper and pinched her between them. With a bellow of rage, he tore her free and smashed her like a slab of meat once, twice, thrice against the floor. The glass blocks cracked under her, and for a horrifying moment I thought he was going to smash her right through the floor and into the firestorm below. I loaded another missile, pointed it between those upraised hooves, and fired it into his savaged face. The impact made him sway back, and Rampage tumbled to the ground in a crunchy thump. Stygius dive-bombed the warden. Shadow flashed away, and then dive-bombed again, each hit corresponding with an eruption of flaming ghoulish flesh. The Bat Pony was relentless in his assault. Carrion had swapped to using Xanth's beam gun almost exclusively, the emerald lance disintegrating a thin line of armor with every pass. I loaded another missile, and the warden glared at me and took a deep breath. Oh, I'd seen enough flaming ones to know what was coming next. He opened his mouth wide and spewed an almost liquid stream of fire at me, and I was running as fast as my hooves could carry me, which, due to my missing leg, was unfortunately not quite fast. I might have gotten clear of the main stream, but I was pretty sure my ass was on fire, and so was my missile launcher. I tossed it away as I rolled across the blazing hot, but not actually on fire at the moment, floor. The rocket launcher exploded somewhere behind me as I concentrated on putting myself out. Almost a minute later, I'd extinguished the blue flames on me and looked up at the immense ghoul monster as it incinerated a corner of the room. And then I realized just how radioactive the room was just now. I'd walked in here with almost no rads, and now I was almost in the yellow. Sweat poured down my face as I rose to my hooves and watched the blows Stygius was raining down, healing almost as fast as he could inflict them. Even Xanth's beam gun, while devastating to his armor, wasn't inflicting enough damage to overcome his incredible regeneration. I hoped that Xanth was able to lift the lockdown soon. We didn't have enough firepower for this. I brought the AM rifle around and took aim through its scope as the warden swiped at Stygius, and then loaded a shell with an orange band. Who knew AM ammunition came in explosive flavor? The shot struck the only vulnerable spot I could see, his eye. The round exploded, the fiery eyeball erupting in flaming fluid. My satisfaction was short-lived, however, as he started regenerating immediately. The warden screamed as I loaded another round and fired at his other eye socket, where the swollen orb was already reforming from Rampage's attack. The warden was learning, though. My shot was blocked by an armored leg, the round only blowing out one of the plates. If we couldn't blind him, I feared that this fight wasn't going to last long at all. And my fears were quickly realized. As the warden shielded his face with one leg, his other hoof ripped a chunk of his own armor, scraping off the metal in a heaping scrap, and then threw the jagged spray of shrapnel right at Carrion. The griffin gave a squawk as the metal sheared through one of his wings and tore his weapons to shreds. "Xanth! I could really use that lockdown lifted!" I screamed as I turned. Both the warden's eyes were already restored in their sockets. I fired as quickly as I could, but the warden knew what I was aiming for and shielded his gaze with his right foreleg, as his left gathered up another wagon-sized chunk of debris. I really didn't think I could dodge that.
"Warden Hobble!"
yelled a mare from the doorway.
"Here's our resignation!"
I turned and saw the half-dozen guards, Silver Spoon, Snails, and even Psycho Shy, laying down a withering spray of fire at the warden. A single assault rifle might not do much, but now 9 ponies fired with all they had at the monstrous ghoul. With so much fire, and such a huge, impossible-to-miss target, the combined attack was ripping hundreds of holes in the flaming monster. He threw the chunk of metal at the gathered guards, but Snails and Twitchy's horns glowed, and sent the stealing arc up and smashing into the wall above them. Blackjack! I have it! Xanth shouted from the terminal. Over the intercom, a voice said, "Lockdown lifted. Guards, please return to your supervisors for assignments." I dared a tiny little smile. Then the fourth fuel pod blew. The explosion below collected a massive fireball that swept up the central shaft to a glare so intense I would have blinded me had I still had eyes I was born with. The heat was such that I thought for a moment that the warden had breathed fire over me again. The swirling ball of flame crashed into the underside of the floor with such force that every pony not already airborne was tossed a yard into the air, the ponies in the door falling back into the corridor, and the floor exploded upwards in crumbles of blazing heat. I had the fortune to drop down on one of the beams as the smoke swirled around us. "Get out!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, feeling the inside of my chest cooking from the heat in the air. Thank goodness I could regenerate, if I somehow survived. Slowly, I pulled myself to my hooves, though I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go from there. The flames had dropped back down, but the heat was now more intense than I'd ever imagined. I could only see a blazing lump before me where Hobble had been. So I lifted Lacuna's AM rifle and fired as blindly as I could. I spotted Xanth being carried overhead by Stygius for just a moment. Both were struggling, but they were making it. All I had to do was hang on and let him come for me. Until then, I fired because it was the only thing left to do. Distract the monster. Damage him. Get the others out of this hell. Then I saw the bat pony above me. I stretched out my hoof, extending my fingers. All I needed was him to grab me and pull me to safety. Just a few more feet. A few more inches. He had me. My fingers grabbed his outstretched foreleg, and he beat his wings furiously as he struggled to pull me clear. Then a massive spar of metal, sticking from the end of the blazing hoof, lanced out of the smoke and impaled me right through the middle. The shock made my fingers release, and a blast of fiery wings sent the already wavering Stygius careening off into the smoke. Slowly, the monstrous ghoul lifted me, speared on a spur of steel, closer to that immense face. I couldn't even keep my focus from the pain roaring through my crippled torso. He stared at me as if I were some sort of bug, flopped me left and right.
It's funny how small you all look so far below me. Snack-sized.
I just dangled there before him and saw the robots floating around us, their cameras watching as he brought me close to his maw and bit down on my left foreleg. I felt the metal start to deform, and I beat on his face with my stump. Either he liked the taste of metal or he'd gone completely mad and didn't care. I guess the latter, as my leg was nearly ripped off my body at the shoulder. I could feel my flesh straining, bones shifting, and synthetic organs threatening to follow the limb out.
Warden Hobble, this is the OIA, the voice said over the PA system speakers,
synthetic and masculine sounding. It made us both threes.
We would like to release the mare you have in your custody. She is one of our operatives, investigating a threat to the kingdom for us, and beyond your jurisdiction.
Was it Watcher? It sounded like Watcher, amplified 100 times. The warden paused, releasing my leg, as he looked towards the ceiling and then at the hovering robots.
OIA, huh? You've got no right to intrude on my prison. This bitch is here for me to punish, he roared. There is no authority here but mine. Do you hear me?
I'm sorry to hear that. Please remain still. The synthetic voice buzzed, and then went silent. The warden looked at me in bafflement, then snorted and moved me towards his mouth once more. Suddenly, the left wall began to glow. A perfect, round white patch spread rapidly, then bulged outwards, and suddenly a blinding line of green as thick as my hoof blasted through, pierced the warden, and struck the far wall, and then vaporized it as well, and a hall behind that as well, and the wall behind that. The beam disappeared. I looked off to the left, out the hole, due west to the core. Okay, definitely not Watcher, unless Spike had access to the core's defensive systems. The warden's body crumbled to pieces almost instantly, thumping to the inferno below. and I didn't see anything that was going to keep me from tumbling down after him. The spur of steel stuck through me, still had several thousand pounds of armor attached to it, and I was tumbling down into the flaming abyss. Then a hoof claw swept out of the smoke, ripping into what remained of my left leg and halting my fall. The spur ripped free as it fell, and I felt blood pouring down my torso as I dangled there. Rampage grinned down at me.
Damn, Blackjack, your ass is heavy.
I couldn't do anything but smile as she hauled me up and tossed me over her shoulders. The beating she'd endured had smashed her spine flat. She walked along the smoking steel beams towards the nearest edge and set me down beside the warden terminal. I couldn't stand. The hole in me was more than I could bear. "Did the others get out?" I asked, trying to move my mangled right leg.
I think so,
Rampage said, then noticed a safe in the crumbling wall. She punched it with her hoof, and something inside the door snapped. It swung open, and inside was a large bag.
Not sure what the plan is now. Guess they get free while we die,
Rampage said with a fatalistic stoicism. She sat beside me and opened the bag, her eyes going wide.
But at least we can die rich.
I looked over at what had to be thousands of bits. Clearly, the warden had been saving up for his own retirement. Wait, why was there craziness going on in my vision again? The panel covered my pip-buck had been stripped away, and the device was doing something, and the warden's terminal was doing the same. EC 1101, routing waypoint accessed. Next waypoint, Shadowbolt Command, Shadowbolt Tower, Hoovington. I groaned and closed my eyes, feeling darkness creeping over me. My body was slipping away. It was like I was floating. Wait a minute. I was floating. "It seems the lockdown is lifted," Lacuna said in my mind as she pulled Rampage and me up towards her. Lacuna was alive and wonderful. If I didn't have a great big hole in me, I'd have leapt up and kissed her. She was winging her way out of a large melted hole clear through the prison.
Wait, leave me behind. This is my best chance of getting obliterated,
Rampage shouted as she waved her hooves impotently, trying to get back into the prison. Lacuna selectively ignored her, for which I was grateful. A black and blue skywagon pulled by Blossom's Fourth and Stygius was flying rapidly to the south towards Meatlocker. Lacuna followed it, winging through the rainy night air. And when she was far enough from the innervation, we disappeared in a flash and reappeared in the back of the transport. "Please, step back," Lacuna announced as she stuck her horn in the hole in my gut. Wonderful healing magic began to spray forth. And then suddenly there was a massive smash that flipped the skywagon over in the air. Over and over we tumbled before Luna's magic reached out and stabilized us. "I thought you died," I thought at her. "How could the pony die when there was never a pony to begin with?" she replied cryptically. But before I could really ponder what that was supposed to mean, she continued. "I was merely stunned and trapped on the roof between turrets," the Alicorn thought at me. "Really?" I thought back, feeling slightly disappointed. "You were just knocked out." "Well, that. And another wanted to observe you without my help," Lacuna said acidly. "You performed adequately," the goddess interjected smugly. No wonder I'd lost connection with Lacuna just then. "Bitch." "We heard that," the goddess muttered. Lacuna fussed over me, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Don't move. You've lost a lot of blood." I couldn't answer. I couldn't feel anything. I stared out the rear of the wagon and saw Hightower enveloped in a blue-green flame that just kept expanding and expanding. The fire seemed to be devouring the prison and the surrounding yard as the globe of disintegration grew and grew. And then it was gone, and the massive structure was collapsing in on itself, filling an immense glowing crater. Not even the foundations remained. Hightower. I'd beaten it. I had. There was just one remaining problem. Within me, the curse gave a sudden lurch, and I felt something fundamentally inside me break. It was as if I were slipping out of myself and drifting away on a light breeze. I tried to fight, but there wasn't anything left for me to hold on to. A strange current was sweeping me away. Lacuna was shouting, Snails was talking about boats, and then I felt something familiar. Dying. Again. Footnote: maximum level reached.